Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic just solved Ultimate Custom Night and its biggest mysteries. Mysteries that can finally help us understand characters like William Afton and how it's all connected to the modern lore and timeline. By now I'm sure many of you have seen amazing theories on Secret of the Mimic and on Edwin Murray's deceased son, David. Like theories by T-Dreads and Fazbear's Entertainment on God David, a theory by Flipside on Midnight Motorist and how David might be at the center of it all, and a theory by The Unwithered Truth on Ultimate Custom Night that I want to expand on today in this video. UCN is a game that divides the fandom in multiple aspects and is one of the more interesting games as there's a ton of unsolved and hidden mysteries. But now with Secret of the Mimic, I believe this newest game has finally provided us with some answers. But first I recommend checking out all these videos by these talented creators as they can fundamentally change what we know about the franchise. So my name is Bronze Films and let's go over how Secret of the Mimic tells us that there are dozens of souls torturing William Afton in Ultimate Custom Night. Starting with what we know about a new tragedy, Fall Fest.
What are you waiting for?
In order to truly cover Fall Fest, let's go back to the very start when it was first introduced. In the Help Wanted Dreadbeard DLC, we learn that this DLC takes place within the actual Fall Fest Carnival, as the game's hub contains a banner advertising Fall Fest 1983, an important year for the franchise. We then saw a poster for Fall Fest 1970 revealed in the Help Wanted 2 game hub, as we can also assume that the carousel minigame focusing around Moon where you have to fix the carousel while avoiding him, and the Carney minigame where you shoot at targets with a Phaser Blast for points, both took place in the Fall Fest Carnival itself, and up to this point we would only get more references and Easter eggs to this carnival. In Security Breach we found this arcade machine of Balloon Boy which took place in a carnival, this poster advertising Fredbear's singing show. In Ruin we saw these carnival animal mascot suits, and even the Mimic wore a carnival lion suit in the Scooper ending. And now finally, with the release of Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, we now have concrete information on the Fall Fest Carnival, how it's connected to Fazbear's, and its eventual downfall, which I think is the big mystery we can connect to Ultimate Custom Night into this purgatory. Secret of the Mimic is centered around MCM, Murray's Costume Manor, a contracting business owned by Edwin that would create mascot suits and technology for companies and events. One of these companies was of course Fazbear's Entertainment, who commissioned various projects like Chica's Party World. This is the first project we hear of them working together on, a location we've known almost nothing about before this point. Here in a text log we learn that a client, or Fazbear's, is very happy with the design, and that Chica's design came from Fiona, Edwin Murray's wife. And of course we learn that MCM was commissioned to work on Fall Fest. We find the same Fall Fest 1970 poster from Help Wanted 2 alongside collectibles from the actual carnival. We find a snow globe from Fall Fest that looks similar to promotional art for the event featuring animatronics and even the puppet as a scarecrow. We even find an admissions ticket for Fall Fest, a ticket with the same colors from the poster and something we've never really seen before. And like I mentioned, it's assumed we already saw two exact attractions from Fall Fest 1970 and Help Wanted 2, meaning there was a Phaser Blast type of attraction that included the Carney animatronic that could have possibly been created by Edwin for Fazbear's, which could also mean that the other Rockstar animatronics were also part of the MCM catalog, which is why we see them show up once more in FNAF Pizzeria Simulator. And I think we can say the exact same thing about the carousel minigame, as we know Moon was also created by Edwin. But most importantly, we learn that Edwin's wife Fiona decided to go to Fall Fest with the installation team because she felt that something was wrong.
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished. It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong, just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
This trip was supposed to last a week, but as we learn in another voice log, Fiona never returns and Edwin is forced to raise David completely on his own.
Oh, why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here with me and David. Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own? His life is ruined. My life is ruined.
But how and why? How did Fiona die at Fall Fest? Well, to find out, the first thing we know for almost certain is that it was a fire that killed her. The 1970s Fall Fest fire, a fire I'll mention again later on when talking about UCN. In both Help Wanted 2 Fall Fest minigames, both of them end with a secret level where the attraction catches fire. With the carousel minigame, you face Jackal Moon while fixing the carousel once more, but in the middle of the minigame, a fire will randomly start engulfing the attraction and Moon slowly. With the Carnage minigames focused on FNAF 2, after completing the level like normal, the arm of the cardboard cutout of Dreadbear will snap off, causing electrical sparks to go flying, which will also cause a fire. The fire will spread across the wagons and even to Carnage himself, which will end the minigame. And in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 Phaser Blast level, we then see the aftermath of the fire while defending yourself against Springtrap. You'll find the wagons and even Carnage completely burned with nothing in the attraction left. So it appears that a fire brought down Fall Fest, meaning we can assume it's what killed Fiona, and we almost know for certain who caused this fire, the franchise's most infamous killer, William Afton. Throughout this game, we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his own company. Through audio and text logs, we learn how William was in contact with a leak from MCM who gave him the contact information of all the employees of the company. And we also know some employees sold Edwin's work to most likely William.
Attention traders, admin wing permissions have been revoked. And no, you can't clear out your desks. You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
We also learned that William and Fazbear's Entertainment kept delaying a project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF 1 location. In the research and development area, we can find the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria that has the exact same hallways, offices, and stage. Of course, there are also the prototype animatronics of Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, alongside the FNAF 1 endoskeletons. So after delaying the project over and over, Edwin would lose his friends, money, and after the death of his family, he would finally lose his company and everything he's built.
I feel stupid recording this, but I just hope somehow that you can still hear me. I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. Our employees, my friends, they keep leaving. The money's gone. I just need to finish the new Fazbear project, and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal. I miss my friends. Our friends. I miss you. I miss you more than you'll ever know.
And clearly William is successful in taking over Edwin's life, so what if to make sure that Edwin's life would crumble and he would lose everything? What if William killed Fiona with the Fall Fest fire? I think the first major piece of evidence is the carousel minigame. In the Jacko Moon level, when looking from the outside perspective, we actually see that the fire started in this barn and that it then spread to the rest of the attraction. So what if William was inside that barn? He would start the fire where no one would be able to see him and would then disappear. Fiona would be somewhere else in the carnival helping the installation team and most likely didn't know a fire started until it was too late. And it appears that Moon.exe actually confirms this. As I'm sure many of you know by now, Moon.exe is a minigame accessible through the helper terminals and acts as a way to tell a story about the Murrays. There's a ton to go over in Moon.exe, but most importantly you run into Sun, who we can confidently say is meant to represent Fiona, who is described as the old woman inside of the rundown cabin in the woods. We know this for certain as we face the F10 and 4 program, which is the name of the AI also known as M1, a program created by Edwin to babysit David. So when this program or Fiona begins to talk to us, the monitors behind the computer display the exact same icon of Sun from Moon.exe, which is most likely saying that they are one and the same and can be used to represent one another. And when looking back to the minigame, we find statues that are clearly supposed to represent Edwin and Fiona, but Fiona's statue is burnt with the Fall Fest globe collectible that I mentioned earlier right in front of it, which could imply that this statue or Fiona was burnt by a fire that occurred in this event in the snow globe, Fall Fest. And on top of that, you can also find a seamstress building that was burnt to the ground, another way to show Fiona was in that fire, as we know she loves sewing together hand puppets, like the Foxy Crew hand puppets we see in the theater. And finally, when facing Big Top and handing him the Fall Fest admissions ticket that I mentioned earlier, he says, "This is the one. This is where Sun left, leaving them behind." I think it's obvious that this is yet another way how the game is telling us how she died. The one is the Fall Fest Carnival where Sun or Fiona would leave to but would never return from. And for one final piece of evidence, in the Carnage minigame that I mentioned earlier, in the final level, the only thing we see left after the fire is Springtrap or William Afton, which could be a way to tell us that he's the only thing that remained and stayed alive after the fire, since he caused it and was able to escape. But enough about Fall Fest, now we can finally take a look at William Afton's personal hell.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
Five Nights at Freddy's Ultimate Custom Night really needs no introduction. It's William Afton being tortured for eternity by the one you should not have killed. Who this is a controversial debate on its own, with some believing it's the crying child, Cassidy, Andrew, and in the unwithered truth theory, he even suggested it could be David, Edwin's deceased son from Secret of the Mimic. Now for the sake of this theory and because I love that video, we are going to say it's David, and like I mentioned earlier, I'm proposing that David isn't alone in holding William in this purgatory. Not only is there 1, 5, or even 10 other souls, but I think we can go as far to say that all 50 selectable characters represent a soul tormenting William. Now before you click off the video, hear me out as I go through a surprisingly decent amount of evidence. It's already been theorized that there are other souls in UCN based on voice lines that make it seem like the one you should not have killed isn't alone. So because of this, I decided to go back and to listen to every single voice line of every single animatronic. And I found that there are at least 15 different voice lines from different characters that indicate other souls are aware of where they are and what they are doing. They also just aren't the one you should not have killed speaking through them like with the mediocre melodies. They're completely separate souls who would want to torture William. Take a listen to these voice lines from Withered Bonnie and Ballora.
What is this new prison? Is it me trapped or is it you? Perhaps it is us both.
These are strange circumstances that have brought us together.
Withered Bonnie's line implies that even he doesn't know how he ended up here and that it might have even been against his will, something I'll touch more on soon. With Ballora, once again she is aware of the circumstances, and this feels like someone new speaking, who may have also known William at one point. Now take a listen to these voice lines from Nightmare Balloon Boy and Rockstar Bonnie.
There just isn't room in here for both of us.
So good to see you again, my truest friend. But now your life must end.
With Nightmare Balloon Boy, we once more see the reassuring idea of there being someone else here with William, as he is even being tortured by these same nightmares he would force test subjects to go through. With Rockstar Bonnie, whoever soul this is was true friends with William at one point when they're both presumably alive, which brings me to the core of this theory. William Afton has had much more victims than any of us could have anticipated. More than the souls of Charlie Emily, possibly David Murray, souls of the missing children incident, or even the dead children incident. We're talking about dozens of victims, and I think most of them came from one place, Fall Fest. Like I said, if William was responsible for murdering Fiona in a fire, to me it's hard to believe that she would be the only victim or casualty. Especially since in Help Wanted 2, it seems that we are playing these games while they're active and while the park would be open. So when this fire would randomly start in a barn and would spread to attractions, this would all happen when Fall Fest is actively open. Meaning there would be Fiona's installation team, employees of Fall Fest, and families, all most likely caught in this fire and became William Afton's casualties. They would all then become vengeful spirits with the perfect place for a reunion where they could all get revenge, being William Afton's purgatory or nightmare fueled by agony, depending on what you believe in. When looking back to the voice lines, now take a listen to these lines by Orville and Rockstar Foxy while keeping the Fall Fest fire in mind.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
Yarg, ye play with fire, and sometimes ye get burned.
With Foxy, obviously we get a reference to a fire, which I know is something broad, but we can't connect this Rockstar to Carney, who was in the Fall Fest fire and is technically a Rockstar animatronic as well. But this line about a fire is just the beginning. With Orville, he is definitely referring to Henry Emily, who tried to free William and the other souls in animatronics in Pizzeria Simulator. But of course, the one you should not have killed stops this and is speaking through Orville. But at the end of the line, he says, no matter how many times they burn us, that's right, multiple souls. Sure, this could be referring to the other souls in FFVS like Charlie or Elizabeth, but that game suggests they were able to move on and that every soul in that game moved on besides William. In a way, all remaining souls had their happiest day. But victims from Fall Fest wouldn't be able to move on, especially since it seemed like they were never mentioned anywhere else in the timeline. So they could be the other souls Orville is referencing to holding William back. Now take a listen to lines that are at this point infamous voice lines from Jacko Chica.
I am a burning reminder of your misdeeds. Greetings from the fire and from the one you should not have killed.
With the first line, Jacko Chica could clearly act as a reminder of the Fall Fest fire and his actions of burning innocent people. With the next line, we again hear from the one you should not have killed, but this time he isn't speaking through Jacko Chica. Chica just mentions him as she greets William from the quote-unquote fire, maybe the Fall Fest fire. If this were to really be the case, then I think we can even say that this is Fiona's vengeful spirit itself. We know in a way Fiona was responsible for creating Chica and Chica's party world, so is it really that far-fetched to say that this is a way to represent her? Sure, we mostly saw her through the sun characters and through the puppets, but these are her creations just like Chica. That's why Fiona's greeting William from the fire, since that's where she was murdered. This could mean that this is a mother and son duo torturing William in this nightmare, which is kinda wholesome in a way. Aww. But to really just throw an idea out there, let's take a listen and look at the character of Nightmare Freddy.
I am given flesh to be your tormentor.
Here this line implies that David could have given these vengeful souls quote-unquote flesh and new identities as animatronics from William Afton's past. That's why we see Scraptrap and Springtrap. They obviously aren't actually William, but different souls given his identity to almost mock him and his failures. And this next line only supports this even further.
I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed.
This is clear confirmation that the one you should not have killed is rebuilding these animatronics for this nightmare, and again, I think it's also to pair an animatronic with each soul. Also take a look at Nightmare Freddy's icon when selecting characters. We see Freddy in the back with the Freddles in front of him. Looks normal, right? But to me it looks like a dad posing for a picture with his 3 children. Okay, whoa, I know that seems crazy and just wrong, and I could definitely be looking too deep into things just like Mr. Hippo says.
Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all.
But in context of Fall Fest, it could make a lot of sense. Like I said earlier, if it really was open when this fire occurred, then of course there would be families like a dad and his kids. If they also got caught up in this fire and became casualties of William Afton, then it could make sense they would become vengeful spirits that would return in the form of Nightmare Freddy and his Freddles. But really this is just speculative, and I admit it doesn't have the strongest evidence towards it. Also, because this is William Afton's personal nightmare, we of course see artifacts from his life, like posters from different pizzerias, a recreation of a room from his house he most likely used only for experiments, and we can actually find a reference to Fall Fest. In Pizzeria Simulator, we were introduced to this Spookfest poster, which at the time didn't have a meaning to, nor could we connect it to anything. But then in the Help Wanted and in the Dreadbird DLC I've talked about all video, we saw this poster return in this barn, which to me is saying that Fall Fest and Spookfest are one and the same, different names for the same event. But we also saw this variation of a Fall Fest poster in Ultimate Custom Night and in one of the hallways. If everything around him is supposed to be a reminder of his misdeeds, then this poster would be perfect. It's where he would take dozens of lives as casualties, and having to stare at this poster over and over while being tormented by his own creations seems like a fitting end for this character. Although for saying the majority of these souls came from Fall Fest, there is still a chance that there are some souls we're familiar with. Unwithed Truth already brought up a lot of great evidence to why the crying child could possibly be represented through Nightmare Fredbear, and why he would even need to torture William. So if this really is a reunion, I do believe CC could be a part of this group. Or instead of them directly being in Afton's nightmare, it could also relate to memories. Now I know earlier I said that victims of the MCI or Charlie Emily most likely have moved on, which I still believe is true, so what if it's the agony of their memories which is making them return? We know memories have had a crucial component in the franchise, and especially with these newer games like in FNAF Help Wanted 2. That's why we have 2 puppets and 2 different Charlies, 2 sets of memories both caused by William, which could also be why they sound very different.
Seeing you powerless is like music to me. There is room for one more.
We could also apply the same reasoning to the victims of the Fall Fest fire, where it's the mix of the agony of their memories being in that fire that created this nightmare or purgatory for William. But I still personally like the idea more that it's their actual souls finally getting revenge with the help of David and even possibly Fiona. Now I don't know if this was all just a group chat created by David or something like that, since I don't really have a reasonable explanation to how they would all come together in one single place. But what I do know for certain is that it's all just a theory.
A game theory!
By no means am I saying that anything in this video is confirmed or that it should be taken as canon, especially since we actually don't know anything about the Fall Fest fire. Yes, we finally got some information about it in Secret of the Mimic and how it's connected to Fiona and her death. But besides that, who caused it, why, and if there were any other casualties could simply go any other way. I also understand the criticism of even using Secret of the Mimic to solve parts of the earlier story, as when these games were released, we can assume that Scott didn't have the Mimic and his new family planned all the way down the line. Instead, I think it was just ideas Scott had that were fleshed out games later and would then be connected back to the original games, which is why I think multiple souls in UCN would even work. So just take all of this as speculation, and again, it's just a theory. So with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories that you have, and if you believe Secret of the Mimic can solve Ultimate Custom Night. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel. Secret of the Mimic solved FNAF security breach and its biggest mystery that has divided the fandom for years. Now I know I throw that word around a lot throughout this channel, but trust me, this time it's needed, as not only do I think this game tells us how the Pizzaplex is connected to MCM, but it finally gives us an answer to the infamous sticky note room into who Burntrap really is. So my name is Bronze Films, and join me as I cover why the Pizzaplex was built directly over Murray's costume manor, why the fixed mimic from the Moon.exe ending is the animatronic who lived in the sewer area and was the one who wrote on all of the sticky notes, and most importantly why the mimic is actually Burntrap and why they have always meant to be the same. So please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and let's get started. Before we can even look at Burntrap or other big mysteries like that, I first want to look at what I think is one of the most overlooked areas from Security Breach, the sewers. I also want to give credit to Johnny the Night Guard, who made a discovery that will be mentioned later in this video, and it's what inspired me to take a look at this area, so thanks a ton. In order to reach this area behind the food court and on level B3, you find this elevator, which looks very old and withered by the way, almost as if it came from somewhere else. But you reach the docks and laundry area, where venturing to the back you'll find a long set of stairs leading to the sewers. And I believe that this entire sewer area is MCM, meaning the Pizzaplex was built directly on top of it, and it looks like they didn't even try to hide it. Once in the sewers, we find a lot, and I mean a lot of trash that came from the Pizzaplex itself and anything that was left from MCM. There are destroyed staff bots, which are important, so remember that for later. Walls are caving in against themselves, and there's a ton of rubble and red bricks that could have only come from one place, Murray's costume manor. Comparing these bricks with walls from the Pizzaplex or even with walls of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place in the sequel, they just simply don't match up. But when comparing them with the walls from Secret of the Mimic, there is a clear similarity, and the foundation that is even keeping the roof stable or the sewage area here is clearly from MCM as well. Again, we can compare old wooden pipes that are almost identical, and that's also why it looks like these walls could collapse at any moment since they are decades old. There are a few big rooms that show us more trash from MCM and were most likely rooms or areas that we're even familiar with, like the large theater or even the parking lot. But some of the strongest evidence comes from these 1970s style TVs that could have only come from Secret of the Mimic, which takes place in 1979, and we find the exact same TVs throughout that gameplay. This maze section where Chica chases you is almost identical to this maze section from the event Arnold goes into with the parachute ending. Here we find similar walls and bricks, and even the ways the walls are formed almost look identical once more. But an odd detail I want to point out is this room where the sewer level begins. Walls are completely made up of car parts like tires, gears, and steering wheels. These parts could have possibly come from all the cars left with the MCM or Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place location, but regardless, it does look like MCM is under the Pizzaplex, so what could all this possibly mean? Well, I think it's obvious that Fazbear's Entertainment is reusing whatever they can from Murray's costume manor to save time, energy, and money, which fits perfectly with what we know about the company. Reaching the lowest level B1, you find wires that resemble the exact same material and look of Jackie's arms. They are the same orange flexible arms that we of course see Jackie use to chase us around the manor, before ultimately disappearing for the rest of the game. So what if after Fazbear's attained the MCM building and found the remains of Jackie, they would keep this animatronic for parts to use later, where decades later either her exact arms or replicas were used as wires that continued throughout most of the sewer. Although this could 100% be a stretch, it's definitely not a coincidence they look very similar. And it's not the only place we find reused things or assets from the manor. When taking a look at the upgrade station, it uses a similar interface as all of the computers from Secret of the Mimic. It's a green interface with pixelated 8-bit buttons. Of course, this could be a stretch as well, but it could also be the reason why the computers in Security Breach and Ruin appear to be much older than the time period those games take place in. In the loading dock area I mentioned earlier and in this server room, we can actually find basically identical orange conduit fluid in these pipes that we can of course find all throughout the manor in Secret of the Mimic. We can assume it serves the same purpose here to power parts of the Pizzaplex, and if it was somehow left over from MCM, then it makes perfect sense that Fazbear's Entertainment would reuse it here. Maybe it's even similar to the liquid that is powering the charging stations, as it even brings Glamrock Chica back to life in ruin. But if Fazbear's would go as far to reuse parts of old animatronics and of a building that are decades old, what if they reused a certain endoskeleton we're all familiar with to bring back their most infamous villain? This sticky note room is something I mentioned briefly, and it's one of the biggest mysteries or an unsolved mystery of FNAF Security Breach, with fans theorizing about this room over the course of the few years this game has been out, and even today it's going to be one of the main parts of this video. Before even reaching the sewers, you find this room filled with dozens of sticky notes with different messages or drawings on them. Some examples include a sticky note with the message "Happy Place, Party Time, and all of my friends." There are also drawings of things from a birthday party like cake, presents, balloons, and people. We find nightmare staffbot heads, candles, and as one of the notes says, "This is my home, leave," it tells us that something lived on here or was held captive. There's a ton more sticky notes that I'll go over soon, so don't worry, but it's also worth noting how above this room we find a recreation of the Afton family using staff pots. At the head of the table, this staff bot represents Miss Afton, the magician bot is William Afton, the circus baby bot is Elizabeth Afton, the worker bot is Michael Afton, and this bot without a head is pretty self-explanatory to be the crying child. So whoever was in this room not only wrote on all the sticky notes, but they also made a replica of a family. So who is it? Well, some popular theories believe it could have been Gregory, who's actually a robot, the crying child, who's also a robot, or even Charlie Emily, who is, you guessed it, a robot. But to find an answer, when looking at all the clues this game gives us, we first find a desk with the blueprints for the security breach endoskeletons in the first of the sticky notes. These first set of sticky notes include drawings of Freddy, tally marks counting something, and the number 141. This was most likely a workstation for one of the employees who knew about what was in the sewers. As you go through the sewers, more sticky notes are scattered around, and something I haven't seen many people point out is that wherever there are sticky notes, there are also cameras watching whatever was writing these. Sure, this could be for gameplay reasons, but we can also apply a practical reason to it, employees studying something. Another point I want to bring up is that sticky notes are actually scattered around all of the Pizzaplex, meaning whoever did this walked freely at one point and traveled around the Pizzaplex, leaving sticky notes wherever they went. And a text log I'll mention soon actually supports this. So we have something living in the sewers and in the Pizzaplex while writing on sticky notes that revolve around birthday parties, a family, and friends, while also being watched by Fazbear's Entertainment. So I think it's obvious who this character is that needs no introduction. It's always been theorized that the Mimic could be the one in this room, especially because we see a repeated theme of 3 on the sticky notes, 3 things like balloons, presents, and words, which could represent Edwin, David, and the Mimic. So this isn't a new theory by any means, but what is and how Secret of the Mimic solves security breach is that this game tells us what version of the Mimic was down here. In the moon.exe ending, after completing this minigame and receiving the glitch permissions by Sun, Arnold is able to reset or fix the violent Mimic back into a state where he is mimicking David and is completely innocent. The fixed Mimic picks up the white tiger plushie that belonged to David and sleeps in a bed while listening to a bedtime story by Fiona and Edwin. So what if it's this fixed David Mimic that lived in the sewers and wrote on all of the sticky notes? When taking a look at this sticky note, "This is my home, leave," this now makes perfect sense and should be taken literally. I mentioned earlier how the Pizzaplex is on top of MCM, which was the Mimic's home in Secret of the Mimic, as that's where Edwin created him and programmed him to mimic David and Fiona. This is why Fazbear's kept the Mimic in the sewers, as that's where he would feel the most at home. All the sticky notes referring to a birthday party could also be connected to this Mimic, since David's birthday would be celebrated every single year with cake, balloons, and presents. And the 3 people wearing party hats could again be Edwin, David, and the Mimic. We also find a sticky note of a security guard, which could actually be Arnold. Arnold was the one who fixed the Mimic and is the first person it saw after being reset to mimic David. This drawing could be of this moment, or it could be of any other employee of the Pizzaplex. But this could also explain the cameras, which would now act as like nanny cams, watching the Mimic everywhere he went, leaving a trail of sticky notes behind him. And in general, we know David liked drawing, as he made this drawing of himself with the Mimic, and we see multiple drawings in his secret tent. So here the Mimic is mimicking David by drawing on all of the sticky notes. I also think that all of the endoskeletons from FNAF Security Breach were based on this Mimic and his design. They do look similar design-wise, and most importantly, that's why we find blueprints at the start of the stairs into the sticky note room. Whoever was working on the designs was most likely in contact with the Mimic, as this is where the sticky notes begin. Maybe the Mimic even saw it as a play area, which is why it's a mess, while the employee worked on the designs. But like I said, this also means that the Mimic was walking freely around the Pizzaplex and the other employees were aware of it. With this message titled "The Job Security," it reads, "Where is everyone? Leo was the only one who had a copy of the maze control key, but I haven't seen him for months. Maybe that creepy bot knows where the key is. Leo was supposed to train it to work the maze. Instead, he tricked the bot into doing busy work under the daycare theater. I'll check after the all-staff meeting tonight. This creepy bot could definitely be the Mimic, but the only issue here is that it's being trained to do busy work and it makes it seem like it isn't a child like we all saw in the ending. So what if intentionally or unintentionally its programming was being reverted to its corrupted and violent state, as the sticky notes might even support this. This has been pointed out previously, but some sticky notes are simply scribbles, drawings, and words that are hard to understand. But others include more complex drawings or easier to understand words. And other notes include sentences that don't look like they were written by a child, but rather someone who is basically an adult. We see a clear progression from the Mimic writing on sticky notes as a child to then writing like an adult. And the duffel bag message suggests that this progression was caused by employees reversing his programming and training it to do their busy work. But by no means does the Mimic story in the Pizzaplex end here, as I think one act of violence changed everything. The reason I even bring up some incident is because of this area found in the upgrade station of the Pizzaplex. Here we find a few glass cells where we can assume Fazbear's was holding things to observe and experiment on. As behind these cells we find endoskeletons locked up in cages and an endoskeleton that seems to be corrupted. But at the end of this hallway we find a cell that has its glass broken and a table flipped over, implying that something broke out. And near the entrance we find a destroyed endoskeleton that was most likely attacked by whatever escaped. Of course I believe this to be the Mimic whose programming has gone rogue and has stopped mimicking David and his behavior. He was most likely locked in this cell after some violent incident but then escaped to continue his rampage. But why? Why does it look like the Mimic's programming was purposely reversed so he would become violent and rageful like he was decades ago? Well, to answer that we need to look at another big mystery from Security Breach. Burntrap is one of those characters that also doesn't need an introduction. Fans including myself have theorized if he's meant to be William Afton or if he was supposed to be the Mimic from the start. I've always been a believer that Burntrap and the Mimic were two separate characters, but today I'm finally changing my mind. If the Mimic's programming was being reverted, then what if it was being changed to mimic William Afton? Now who would do this and why this would be done can be a video on its own, but I think the evidence lies back in the sticky note room. When looking at the notes, it looks like the Mimic was being fed information which confused its programming. We see drawings that clearly come from a child, but one sticky note says grown-ups only, which was always a weird detail to me. If this was a child like the note suggests, why would it refer to itself as an adult? Well, what if the Mimic's programming was confused in mimicking David and William Afton, with David's sides of drawings and William Afton's side of violent tendencies? This could also explain the Afton family staff bots. Why would anyone who isn't a part of this family want to make recreations of them? If the Mimic was being fed data of William Afton and his life, then he could recreate this family that he thinks he's a part of, which could explain the family notes or even these are my friends notes. We could then even apply William's life to some of these sticky notes, like the 3 people being his 3 children, all the references to birthday parties relating to all of his pizzerias hosting birthday parties. But of course the final goal would be to bring back William Afton or Springtrap, which is why the Mimic would revert to his aggressive state. Remember all of the destroyed staff bots I mentioned earlier? Well, I think it's the Mimic almost practicing to be violent on these staff bots that will then be left in the sewers. We know he can easily take care of these staff bots, so here's being taught the same thing. But to try to really convince you, take a look at the purple glow effect we see all throughout the sticky note room and in the sewer area. Look familiar? It's the same purple glow effect we see in Burntrap's room and everywhere else he's previously been. This effect has previously been used to prove that the Mimic is Burntrap, as brightening the room he's revealed in, we find the exact same purple glow effect we see everywhere else. So what if, to really make the Mimic like William, they expose him to this purple gas we saw in this charging station, which could be anything from remnant to agony, which would then be left behind in areas of the sewers. I think this is even the reason we hear about murders in one of the endings. Vanny didn't murder them because of Glitch Trap, but she did it so the Mimic could learn from it and mimic her. It's the other way around. We also find newspapers down in the sinkhole that could have been about the missing children incident that the Mimic would learn about, but at this point this could just be a stretch honestly. But after his escape, I think he was caught once more and shoved into this charging station so he could fully become William Afton. Flesh and an unused Spring Bonnie suit would be added onto him, and our final product is Burntrap from Security Breach. Okay, whoa, I know that's a lot, and most of this is just my personal beliefs based on the sticky notes and purple glow effect. Although it can be a stretch, I do believe it's possible because of how this game was developed. Based on the doc with Scott Cawthon interview, we learned that there are essentially 2 stories within Security Breach, one from Scott and the other from Steelwood Studios. Now I'm not sure who had what idea, but based on the sticky notes and the Afton family bots, it looked like one party wanted whoever was in this room to be someone from the Afton family, while the other party had the Mimic plan based on the epilogue stories. And Burntrap wasn't even what Scott Cawthon had in mind originally, as he was only supposed to stand still and act as a decaying movie prop. So regardless if this is Burntrap or not, what I do think we can say for certain is that the fixed Mimic from the Moon.exe ending is the one who was in the sticky note room. But most importantly, this is just a theory.
A game theory.
Like with all of my theories, nothing in this video is confirmed, nor should anything be taken as canon. This is just an answer to the sticky note room from Security Breach using Secret of the Mimic and its endings. So what do you guys think? Who wrote on all the sticky notes? Was it the Mimic? Can we somehow connect this to Burn Trap, and will this mystery ever be solved? So with all of that said, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories. Also consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel, so thank you so much for watching. Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic solved one of the franchise's most mysterious characters. A character that not only plays a major role in FNAF Security Breach, but one that seems to be connected to the greater lore and timeline of the franchise, Glamrock Freddy. More than a month ago, the latest FNAF game Secret of the Mimic was released, expanding the already established lore by introducing new characters like Edwin Murray. And over the past couple of videos, I used this new installment to try and answer some of the biggest mysteries from the modern era of the timeline, like who is Mexis or what was Fall Fest. But what if we could also use it to solve a character's identity that has remained a complete mystery for years? Who is Glamrock Freddy, and is he even possessed? Well, in this video, I'm going to cover how Secret of the Mimic answers this for us by connecting this character to this game's new protagonist. So, how is Arnold from FNAF Secret of the Mimic actually Glamrock Freddy? Well, my name is Bronze Films, and let's find out together. But I want to give a special thanks to John Cena is Bald, who gave a lot of great ideas in the live stream I did 2 weeks ago that are used in this video, so thank you again. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel. So jumping right into things, Glamrock Freddy was one of the main protagonists of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach and has been the center of discussion ever since this game was released. It can even be argued that this character and his true identity is one of the biggest mysteries to come with this new modern era of the franchise, alongside mysteries like Glitch Trap and Burn Trap, but why? Well, the game tries to tell us that the once normal and friendly Glamrock animatronics suddenly turned aggressive and violent during the events of this game. And we can assume that it was because of a virus, the Glitch Trap virus or the Mimic virus, that has corrupted their programming, making them all target Gregory trying to capture him, all except Glamrock Freddy. Instead, Freddy collapses during his performance after he spots someone in the crowd. He then resets during safe mode with Gregory inside his stomach hatch and acts as an ally for the rest of the game. So how? How does Glamrock Freddy avoid being corrupted, and does this answer have a greater meaning? Well, the consensus among fans ever since this game has been released is that there is a much greater meaning. A meaning that connects to other FNAF games into the earliest points in the timeline, possession. It's no secret that possession has played a crucial role throughout this entire franchise, with characters like Springtrap, the 4-man animatronics, and the puppet. So would it really be that hard to believe that possession would return with these newer FNAF games, even though it's more centered around corrupt AI? Well, some of the biggest theories on who can be possessing Glamrock Freddy include Michael Afton, the Crying Child, and even Henry Emily. But what if he's possessed by none of these characters and is instead possessed by someone who was just introduced in the latest FNAF game, Arnold? For a quick summary of Secret of the Mimic, you play as a new protagonist named Arnold, an employee of Fazbear's Entertainment who has been hired to retrieve the schematics of the original Mimic endoskeleton that was created by Edwin. So, going inside of Edwin's manor, Arnold faces the Mimic inside of various different mascots and animatronics like Jackie, Dolly, an elephant, in-progress mascots, a lion suit, a dog, and so much more. Finally, after reaching 4 AM and after retrieving the schematics, Arnold has the choice of giving the schematics back to dispatch or trying to escape. If you do give the schematics back, you can hop back in the work van and continue to drive off. Then, while driving off, it's revealed that Arnold was being tricked by the M1 program, who was impersonating dispatch and is now being fired and sued by Fazbear's Entertainment.
Arnold, there you are. We've been trying to get a hold of you all night. Why didn't you answer? Fazbear Entertainment has no other option but to let you go.
What? I just talked to you. You told me to give you the data diver and I could go home.
So you admit it? You misplaced company property.
No, I gave it to you.
Fazbear Entertainment will hold you personally responsible for lost or stolen property. What did you expect would happen?
I did everything you told me to.
Don't call us. Our lawyers will be calling you.
And that's when it's revealed that the Mimic is actually inside of the van and will attack Arnold. He will then wake up stuffed inside of an animatronic, just like the many other characters from the franchise. Now, in the parachute ending, Arnold tries to escape by venturing down to the basement or to the research and development area of MCM. Here we can find a Fazbear's project that Edwin was working on for William and Henry, the FNAF 1 prototype pizzeria and animatronics. We find the exact same hallways, rooms, and even the same office. We also find prototype Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica. This is actually the exact same area we find in the bad ending, meaning Arnold was stuffed inside of the FNAF 1 prototype pizzeria. But what animatronic was he exactly stuffed into? Well, alongside the prototypes, we can also find 4 spring-lock animatronics that Arnold wears to avoid the mimic. We can find Monty, who is of course a reference to Montgomery Gator, a Glamrock animatronic that would be used by Fazbear's decades later. Bub could be a reference to Bubba from FNAF World or to Sparky, a dog-like animatronic that was actually just a hoax. And we can also of course find the original prototype versions of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, which is one of the few times we've seen canon designs for both these characters, a major reveal. And during the gameplay of Secret of the Mimic, there's plenty of evidence actually proving that Fredbear's Family Diners opened during this time. We find pizza boxes from the restaurant, and there are also posters advertising the location inside of the manor. But when lining up these suits with the bad ending, it's clear that Arnold was stuffed inside of Fredbear. The shape of the animatronic's head and teeth line up perfectly. So what if, after the Mimic stuffed Arnold into the prototype Fredbear suit, Arnold's soul would possess that animatronic, just like the many other times it's happened in the franchise? But how does this connect to Glamrock Freddy? Well, when comparing both these designs, they share a similar overall head and body shape. Prototype Fredbear has shoulder pads, which is something we've only ever seen in the Glamrocks. And he also has a stomach hatch that opens up that Arnold would use to get inside, just like Glamrock Freddy where Gregory climbs inside of. Do you notice the similarities? That's right, I alongside many others believe that Glamrock Freddy could be the repurposed version of prototype Fredbear, making these two animatronics the exact same. Fredbear even has the word prototype on the back of his head, just like Freddy has the word prototype on the bottom of his foot in Ruin. And it honestly wouldn't be that hard to believe since we've seen Fazbear's Entertainment continue to repurpose MCM's characters and designs, like Big Top to Music Man, the Staff Bots, and even Roxy. So if Arnold is possessing Fredbear, that would also mean he's possessing Glamrock Freddy in FNAF Security Breach. Arnold would be stuffed inside of prototype Fredbear, which would then become Glamrock Freddy, with his soul still inside. And I think the biggest piece of evidence comes from Glamrock Freddy's voice lines.
I know what this is. I have been here before. She brought me here. I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path. I did not want to, but I had no choice. Now I have a choice. I have changed. My friends are here. They are so angry, confused. But I can protect you. I am not me.
With the first line, of course Arnold knows what this place is as he's been down there before all the way back in 1979 when he was trying to escape with the schematics. When Freddy refers to she, we all thought he was referring to Vanessa, but why wouldn't he just say her name or even Vanny? Now it makes much more sense that he was actually referring to M1 or F10N4, who was actually impersonating Fiona, Edwin Murray's wife. It's revealed that F10N4 was impersonating Dispatch to try and take the schematics from Arnold, and in a way it was responsible for luring Arnold to the basement of MCM, where it revealed itself as F10N4, which is a supercomputer. So Freddy was lured here by Fiona. With the next line, I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path. He could have found himself when he realized that he was a part of something that was much bigger. And we can view the line clearing the path more in a metaphorical sense. I think Arnold is one of the main reasons for big events in the timeline to happen, events that involve William Afton, the Mimic, and even Mexis, events I've covered in previous videos. So in a way he cleared the path for the rest of the timeline to happen, which would then lead back to Security Breach. With the next few lines about not having a choice, of course we know Arnold didn't. From the beginning of the game, Arnold was forced to travel to MCM even after a 36-hour shift and was forced into facing the Mimic and trying to retrieve the schematics, which would all lead to his death and being stuffed inside of a suit. Now with the final set of voice lines about his friends, I actually think this connects to the other technicians of Fazbear's Entertainment and to the Blob, but that's a topic for another video. But all of this would have to mean that MCM is under the Pizzaplex, and you can watch this full video where I explain why. I go over red bricks, the pipes found in both MCM and in the sinkhole, and these 1970s style TVs that are found in the Pizzaplex that could have only come from MCM and that time period. In that video I actually go over how most locations are connected by one single forest, so make sure to go check it out. But I think another really cool connection would be the fact that Arnold is reuniting with the Mimic after decades in Security Breach. Now for the sake of the argument, let's say that Burntrap is the Mimic, even though this can of course be debated. But if this was the case, in the Burntrap ending, the Mimic is reuniting with Arnold, who is now Freddy after all those years, and it could even can be a reason why he would want to corrupt him and stop him, the same way he's trying to stop him in FNAF Secret of the Mimic. But I want to make it clear, by no means is this theory perfect. If anything, there's quite a few issues starting with the endings themselves. For the most part, fans can agree that either the parachute or the secret ending is canon, especially since both endings seem to connect to the greater lore of the timeline, meaning that the bad ending where Arnold is stuffed inside of a suit most likely isn't canon. But at the same time, it can honestly go either way, and it can still very easily be canon. Or it's possible that in the parachute ending, the Mimic would still come back for Arnold and would stuff him inside of a Fredbear suit once more. But I know it sounds silly to say that he would come back after just leaving. There's also the issue of how he connects to Gregory. Freddy obviously has some connection to Gregory beyond this game's lore. That's why some fans believe it's Michael Afton and the Crying Child. It's an older brother attempting to protect the younger brother trying to redeem himself after he wasn't able to years ago. So really the only way to explain this is that Gregory reminded Arnold of his own child. In cut voice lines we actually learn that Arnold had a family.
What? Next shift. I just finished a 14-hour shift 2 hours ago. Hey man, come on. I haven't been home in days. What family? My parents are dead. My wife left me last year. Oh God, I haven't seen my kid for...
So what if Gregory reminded him of his child that he would essentially abandon after the events of Secret of the Mimic? This would be a chance to make things right, which is why we see Freddy take on a parental role with Gregory. But most importantly, this video is just a theory. By no means am I saying that anything in this video is confirmed or even canon. But like we can do with many mysteries, I think we can use FNAF Secret of the Mimic to answer who Glamrock Freddy is, and it's also a perfect way to connect this character to the past lore of the games. So what do you guys think? Is Arnold actually Glamrock Freddy from Security Breach? Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories, and who do you believe is possessing Glamrock Freddy? But I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and thank you all so much for watching. Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic solved Security Breach's most mysterious character, a character that seemed to completely confuse the fandom and one that was also even overlooked by fans, the Blob, who is also known as Tangle. Now I know that's a bold claim, especially since Secret of the Mimic seemed to answer mysteries that are more connected to the earlier parts of the timeline, like who created what animatronics and how the Mimic fits with games like FNAF 4 or Sister Location. But I think we can use clues from this game, or rather tragedies, to tell us the true identity of Security Breach's most complicated and intriguing character. In a case where this game's story was essentially split into two different versions, what if FNAF Secret of the Mimic is now the key to having one final answer to who the Blob really is? And if this animatronic is possessed by the spirits or agony of different people? Well, my name is Bronze Films, and let's solve who is possessing the Blob, how many souls are possessing this animatronic, and how the Pizzaplex is the center of this new theory. So please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel. Before we can begin to tackle the amalgamation that is Tangle, it's important to first understand the technicians from Secret of the Mimic. Throughout the main gameplay, we play as Arnold, a technician hired by Fazbear's Entertainment to retrieve the schematics to the Mimic endoskeleton. In one of the endings, Arnold inserts the data driver into the Mimic and fixes its programming, where we can then assume he is able to escape MCM. But in two other endings, Arnold is killed and stopped by the Mimic, as the Mimic flips his work van over or stuffs him into one of the prototype animatronic suits. Arnold fails to retrieve the schematics and isn't actually the only one to do so, or wasn't the only technician sent by Fazbear's. In Murray's Costume Manor, you can find other technicians that were sent by Fazbear's and also ultimately failed to retrieve the Mimic schematics. Outside of the manor, you can even find an abandoned work van that is run down and destroyed. We can assume it belonged to one of the other teams that were sent to MCM, and this van serves as a small clue to their disappearances and murders. Not only do we know that these victims were part of Team 12, but we can also find their actual bodies stuffed inside of mascot suits by the Mimic. Through the text logs, we can even find 3 messages that came from 3 of those technicians that show us exactly where they were killed and what suits they were stuffed inside of. With the first message, it reads,
I hope this message reaches someone. There's something outside. I have no idea what it wants. But I can still hear Thompson's screams. I didn't sign up for this.
We find this text log in the back rooms of the welcome lobby, and right next to the mailbox we find a body inside of a jester costume with only their right arm and leg sticking outside of the suit. This message was most likely their final thoughts before being attacked by the Mimic. And Thompson was also most likely a part of Team 12, and can be any of the other bodies we find. But with the second message, it reads,
I'm almost there. I can see the last permission upgrade. I'm going to get that Christmas bonus, even if it kills me.
So checking a locker near this mailbox and behind the executive permissions machine, you'll find the body of a technician who left this message. Here he is wearing a Swing Bee mascot head, and he was chasing a similar bonus to the one Arnold was offered for retrieving the schematics.
You can't fool me though, you're just trying to snag one of those $25 gift certificates at the end of the year for outstanding performance.
He obviously fails and is one of the secret jump scares of this game, but with the final text log we can actually pinpoint exactly where and what happened to this technician.
I stopped the show. Whew. I don't think there's another way in, so I should be safe for now. There's a maniac in a costume chasing me, like something out of a drive-in movie. No one is ever going to believe me. Just one guy or a whole group of psychos?
This is of course the same welcome show Arnold faces at the beginning of the game, and the mimic jumping from suit to suit is also something Arnold faces. But above the welcome show you can find yet another body of a technician hanging from the ceiling in a Jester mascot suit with their left arm and leg hanging out. Among these three bodies we can also find a body inside of a dog mascot suit in the power room, a body stuffed inside of a hedgehog suit in the theater's audience holding a gift box, and two bodies that are hidden out of the player's view. One is crushed underneath a shelf with their arm popping out, and the other body is stuffed under a pile of different mascot suits, which brings the total number of dead technicians from Team 12 to 7. So 7 dead bodies that are left in MCM, but how does any of it connect to the Blob? In FNAF Security Breach, Gregory goes to the lowest point in the Pizzaplex, which was revealed to be the location from FNAF 6. There he finds a scene code that goes to an even lower level where he finds the Blob, an amalgamation of animatronic parts, wires, and parts of characters we're all familiar with. The Blob tries to stop Gregory, but he is able to burn Trap alongside the Blob and is able to escape the Pizzaplex with Glamrock Freddy. Blob then reappears in a small cameo near the beginning of the Ruin DLC, where it can be seen inside of a hole in the wall before it quickly backs away and becomes out of view, as it will then disappear for the rest of the game. Down in the scene core you can also find a trail of oil left behind from the Blob, as the trail leads to this hole in the wall. This can tell us that the Blob is within the Pizzaplex's walls and structure, meaning it's most likely the reason the Pizzaplex collapsed against itself was because the Blob would hollow out the foundation with massive tunnels, not because of an earthquake like newspapers suggested. But what is this amalgamation of different animatronics? Well, it includes the FNAF 1 versions of Chica and Bonnie, it includes the puppet, Circus Baby, parts of Mangle, and at the head of it all is Funtime Freddy. Now by no means are these the original animatronics from the past restaurants, especially since animatronics like the puppet were burned down in the FNAF 6 ending, and others like Funtime Freddy would become Molten Freddy. But now we have two very different topics that come from two very different time periods in the franchise, so the key to connect them is the Pizzaplex, and more specifically how the manor where Secret of the Mimic takes place is under the Pizzaplex, and you can watch this whole video where I explain how. I go over red bricks, pipes found in both MCM and in the sinkhole, and these 1970s style TVs that are found in the Pizzaplex that could have only come from this time period and from MCM. In that video, I actually go over how most locations are connected by one single forest, so make sure to go check that out here. So if these two areas are one and the same, I'm proposing that the souls or agony of the 7 technicians murdered by the Mimic and left in MCM would possess the amalgamation of animatronics, which would then be known as Tangle, where each technician would possess a body or head, and their eyes would even still be lit up, signifying their presence. Now I know that may seem far-stretched, so to attempt to convince you that it's all true, it's important to first understand that MCM or the Pizzaplex is haunted. I'm sure that most of you know the theory that MCM is haunted by the spirit of David, Edwin's deceased son who presumably possesses the White Tiger mascot. As we can hear his laughter, he'll randomly appear in front of us, and it's a character clearly similar to Golden Freddy. But I believe it's also haunted by the spirits of the dead technicians. Not only do boxes randomly jump at you and the music from the cardboard cutouts start playing as if someone's trying to get your attention, but as another theorist, Logan Entertainment, pointed out in his own video about the Blob, when you first encounter the Mimic in the elephant suit near the crate where he escapes from, you can find an incomplete head of an elephant suit. Taking a closer look at the head, there appears to be a small light source, and on rare occasions, the light source within the head glows very bright and clearly looks possessed. We can even compare this mask to the bad ending of FNAF 3, where we see the main animatronics alongside Golden Freddy having their mascot heads lit up by a bright light source, meaning they are still possessed. So what if this light source came from one of the dead technicians trying to possess the elephant head or trying to get Arnold's attention? And to me, all of this proves that their souls are still somewhere around MCM, which would eventually become the Pizzaplex. Although decades passed between these two time frames, this doesn't mean that these spirits, and vengeful spirits at that, would just disappear or be put to rest. Why wouldn't they possess an animatronic, an amalgamation in the depths of the Pizzaplex where their deaths all occurred? Earlier I mentioned how there were a total of 7 dead technicians, and there just happens to be a total of 7 animatronics in the Blob, a perfect amount of souls for each character. Because the Blob is technically in MCM, I think we can even go as far to say that all of the wires, mechanical parts, and animatronic heads all came from the manor and from this time period. When When looking at all of these wires and heads, they look really old. They don't just look destroyed or withered, but they appear to be decades old. This was a detail that always stood out to me, since well-known theories suggest that the Blob is made up of animatronics from the special delivery service, but those animatronics would almost be completely new and wouldn't necessarily look like this. Now I know that would have a lot of lore implications, but we already saw prototype versions of Bonnie and Chica in the basement of MCM, and it could even be the exact animatronics we're seeing returning once again in the Blob. We also know Edwin was working on puppet prototypes for Fazbear's, so the puppet mask without the tears we see here could be one of those prototypes, something abandoned by Edwin but returning here. But with other characters like Mangle, Funtime Freddy, and Circus Baby, it's harder to prove how they would have come from MCM. But we do also know Edwin was working on alternate Fazbear's designs, which could have included early versions of Mangle or the Funtime animatronics. But there's no real way of knowing this, so saying that all the animatronics come from MCM and from 1979 does have less evidence. But regardless, I still think it's worth considering when trying to solve where these parts came from. But in my last theory video, I covered how Glamrock Freddy might be possessed by Arnold, the protagonist of Secret of the Mimic. You can watch the full video here explaining how that would even be remotely possible, but for the sake of the argument, saying it's true here, voice lines from Glamrock Freddy might also support this claim.
I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path. I did not want to, but I had no choice. Now I have a choice. I have changed. My friends are here. They are so angry, confused. But I can protect you. I am not me.
Now with the final voice lines about his friends being confused and angry, what if Glamrock Freddy's talking about his friends from Fazbear's Entertainment? Other technicians that he surely knew of and was even friends with. Of course they would be angry and confused as they were murdered by the Mimic and their spirits have not been put to rest. This could also mean that the technicians would actually reunite with the Mimic years later. Now this can be a complete theory on its own, but saying that Burntrap is actually the Mimic, it makes sense why the Blob would target him and why he would want to keep him in the fire. Burntrap or the Mimic would murder them all years ago and this would finally be a form of revenge for them. Now I know this ending isn't canon, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen or that the Blob wouldn't target Burntrap. When looking back at the beginning of the video where I said Security Breach was almost split into two stories, I do think Studio Studios or Scott Cawthon had an idea of the Blob being an entity from the past. This is why they chose animatronics that no longer exist, and not characters like Lefty or Molten Freddy, which were the current versions of characters. It looks like they knew this single area would be a part of something from the past, which is where these animatronics came from, but they just didn't know what that place exactly looked like. But with Secret of the Mimic, now we do. It's Mary's Costume Manor, a tragic tale of 7 technicians who were murdered by a rogue endoskeleton, leaving their spirits to possess the building and eventually tangle. This could also explain why the Blob is attempting to escape in ruin and making all those tunnels. These 7 spirits have presumably been trapped in the sinkhole for decades, but now they would be able to escape where Cassie encounters them. Now in terms of other theories, I made a poll on the channel a few days ago and the votes were actually pretty scattered around, so I do believe this could be possible, but for me the biggest issue is moving on. Although the past games and lore were heavily influenced into these newer games, I still don't think the Blob is possessed by any of those souls or agony. I think that the point of FNAF 6 was to show that they were finally put to rest, besides Golden Freddy and possibly William Afton of course, especially now with the release of Secret of the Mimic, where it's been made clear that the focus has shifted to new characters, new animatronics, and new tragedies. In terms of the Blob being possessed by souls in the Pizzaplex like the missing children or Pizzaplex workers we learn about in the books, it could honestly go either way. But I still lean towards the technicians because for one, the books might not even be canon anymore, and we haven't really seen any focus on these new missing children. Besides the newspaper and one of the endings, the focus has been on other topics and characters like the Blob. And in general, it seems like we can use Secret of the Mimic to solve mysteries that were left unanswered and just confusing. Not only with the Blob, but other topics like William Afton, the FNAF Warehouse, and Fall Fest all finally have answers. But of course, I want to emphasize this video is just a theory. By no means is anything confirmed or should anything be taken as canon. But I feel very confident in this answer and I feel it's a way we can solve the Blob. So with all that said, I hope you all enjoyed this video and thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories you may have on the Blob. So please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel. I solved Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, and I believe this game's biggest mysteries and secrets have finally been answered. Now I know that's a big claim, and I'm sure having solved in most of my titles doesn't help either. But over the past month that Secret of the Mimic has been out, I've made a total of 4 different theories attempting to solve different characters, parts of the timeline, and how this game connects to other FNAF games like Sister Location and FNAF 4. So in this video, I'm going to combine all the theories on Secret of the Mimic so far, creating one long video where I break down most of this game's lore that some may have found confusing or complicated. By no means is this my last theory on Secret of the Mimic, but I think it's a good place to start, and I also have other videos in the works as well. So my name is Bronze Films, and let's solve Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, and let's go over everything we know about this game so far. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel. Jumping right into things, let's not only cover if William and Henry stole the idea of the animatronics from Edwin like the FNAF 1 animatronics, but let's also cover the Springlock prototype animatronics that can be found, the role Chica's Party World has, and the meaning of the FNAF 1 prototype pizzeria and animatronics. For a quick summary of Secret of the Mimic, you play as a new protagonist named Arnold, an employee of Fazbear's Entertainment who has been hired to retrieve the schematics of the original Mimic endoskeleton that was created by Edwin. So going inside of Edwin's manor, Arnold faces the Mimic inside of various different mascots and animatronics, like Jackie, Dolly, an elephant, in-progress mascots, a lion suit, a dog, and so much more. Finally, after reaching 4 AM and after retrieving the schematics, Arnold has a choice of giving the schematics back to dispatch or trying to escape, and one of those ways to escape is the parachute ending. Here, a secret exit will be available which will lead you to the underground area of the manor, or the research and development area, and here is really where the new lore reveals itself. You can first find a prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria. This is a one-for-one layout to what we would see years later in FNAF 1, as they share the same hallways, rooms, and even the exact same office. So inside the prototype pizzeria, you can also of course find the prototype versions of the 4 main animatronics. There's a prototype Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, who all have these specific FNAF 1 designs, not the Wizards, the toys, or any other versions of these animatronics, an important detail I'll come back to later. On top of the 4 main characters, you can also find 2 Springlock animatronics, Monty and Bob. Monty is of course a reference to Montgomery Gator, a Glamrock animatronic that would be used by Fazbear's Entertainment decades later. Bob could be a reference to Bubba from FNAF World, or to Sparky, a dog-like animatronic that was actually just a hoax. So does this mean that originally the FNAF 1 pizzeria had 6 animatronics with 2 of them being Springlocks? Or does this mean another location was going to have 4 Springlock animatronics, Fredbear's Family Diner? Down in the pizzeria we can also find the original prototype versions of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, which is actually one of the few times we've seen canon designs for both these characters, a major reveal. During the gameplay of Secret of the Mimic, there's plenty of evidence proving that Fredbear's Family Diner is open during this time. We find pizza boxes from this location and posters inside of the manor. So based on everything with the prototype technology, it looks like Edwin created designs for all 4 animatronics, including the first versions of Spring Bonnie and Fredbear. And he also has many other prototype designs that Fazbear's would eventually use, like Big Top, who was later used as Music Man in the Pizzaplex, or the Hippo mascot and the Orange Elephant, who are later used as Mr. Hippo in Orville and Pizzeria Simulator. And there's even a poster of Kane the Cadet in one of the offices, as he's again used in Pizzeria Simulator. So did Fazbear's Entertainment or William and Henry steal these designs from Edwin? Well, yes and no. I think it should first be made clear that William, Henry, and Edwin all worked together to create the animatronics, and at one point it even looked like they were all friends. William and Henry would create the actual idea of the character, while Edwin was the contractor for Fazbear's Entertainment, meaning Fazbear's would commission technology to Edwin and he would mechanically make their ideas possible. One group wouldn't be able to work without the other, and it wasn't a direct form of fraud on either side. We know they worked together and were friends because of text logs and audio logs, like this one where William left his initials, WA for William Afton, but I'll get back to the contents of this email soon. Edwin also refers to Henry as Hen, a nickname given to a friend, as we see it here in this log and in one of the audio recordings left by Edwin himself.
Test. Journal entry. I got the change order from Hen last night. None of this makes sense. I'm almost done. Why change it now? It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks. Just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
And there's also this recording where Edwin says that they aren't friends anymore, an audio log I will also come back to.
What the hell was that? They treat me like some contractor to crack a whip at. Oh, Fiona was right. They don't think of me as a friend anymore. This is the last project I ever do for them.
So although they did work together and all 3 of them were clearly even friends at one point, Fazbear's or William and Henry definitely still did steal Edwin's work for their own benefit. Something I'll get back to soon when I cover the last Fazbear project, something that we hear about in logs and in audio recordings. So the first project we hear them working together on is actually Chica's Party World, a location we've known almost nothing about before this point. Here in a text log we learn that a client, or Fazbear's, is very happy with the design, and the Chica design came from Fiona, Edwin Murray's wife. So Chica is a character that was not created by William or Henry. She was originally a mascot animatronic created by Fiona for Chica's Party World, and she was also a character created before the other 3 main characters in the band. In one of the rooms we can also find pieces of merchandise for this location, like cardboard cutouts of Chica and her cupcake, who both originally had roller skates allowing them to move around the location. We also see posters advertising food, pieces of Fiona's heart, and even a promotional video. And this mascot suit is even one of the many characters we see the Mimic wear. It's likely that Chica's Party World was the first time Fazbear's and Murray's costume manor worked together, and it wasn't the last, as we also learn about Fredbear's family diner. In another text log with Fiona, we learn about the new spring locks. Here they are working well even with the water damage and should be ready for the diner soon. The person on the other end then says that they just have to warn Hen about the odd behaviors they might have. With these prototypes, we know William and Henry did come up with the characters originally and only commissioned Edwin for the technology of the spring locks. Proof like Fredbear's singing show tell us these characters have most likely been around since years before even locations like the manor were even open. These are ideas from Fazbear's Entertainment that were not stolen and were only made possible with Edwin's technology. And down in the pizzeria, these are most likely the very first prototype springlock animatronics ever created by Edwin. As like I mentioned, the final products are already in the diner that is already open during this time. These prototypes could even explain the many versions of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, as these first prototypes and designs were probably made by Edwin himself, and designs that do look similar to Nightmare Fredbear and to the sprites from the FNAF 4 minigames. But we also know of the classic designs from FNAF 1 and Ultimate Custom Night, where Fredbear shares a similar design to FNAF 1 Freddy with a purple hat and bow tie. Or the design of Springtrap, who is very different from this prototype, which also includes the official Spring Bonnie model that was scrapped from Help Wanted, which still gives us an idea of what this character originally looked like. So why do they all look so different? Well, like I mentioned, I believe Edwin created the prototype designs, but the final classic designs that Fazbear's Entertainment would eventually use were created by Fiona. Something I've mentioned all videos so far are the FNAF 1 prototype designs, which we know were created by Fiona, which are very specific designs. So what if Edwin created these springlock prototypes, gave them to William and Henry where they approved the technology, but instead preferred Fiona's more classic designs? Which is why we have 2 sets of designs. One were created by Edwin, and the other, which were used in the actual diner, were created by his wife Fiona. Or it could be a mix of the two, where Edwin did finalize these designs and Fazbear's had a hold of both sets of designs. As in FNAF 4, the sprites do resemble more of Edwin's designs. So Fredbear's family diner would cycle through the different designs whenever one would malfunction or when they thought necessary, as we do find multiple spring locks within the diner. This could also possibly mean we now have an explanation for animatronics like the FNAF 2 Fredbear with a black hat and bow tie or the Scrap Shop design, which we can now say were created by William and Henry, designs that could have been scrapped and held in a storage room before they hired Edwin as a contractor. Secret of the Mimic is clearly helping us to understand the many different versions of characters and who created them, as when these games were being released and even before this new information was revealed, it was hard to say if all of them were supposed to be the same or if any of the designs were retconned. But now we know they all exist separately and were created by different people, which now finally brings me to FNAF 1 and the downfall of Edwin. We know the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria and animatronics was the last Fazbear project that Edwin was working on, but he was never able to complete it because of William and Henry. Through audio logs, we slowly learn how Edwin began sacrificing all of his time for this project. We first learned that Henry sent an order change from the Springlock animatronics to the normal animatronics, a change that Edwin didn't understand.
Test. Journal entry. I got the change order from Hen last night. None of this makes sense. I'm almost done. Why change it now? It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks. Just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
By this point we can assume Fredbear's has been open for a few years and has been massively successful, which is why they want to open a new location with new animatronics commissioned for Edwin. But we then learn that Fazbear's kept changing and delaying the final project for some unknown reason, and that suddenly they began to treat Edwin poorly and not like their friend any longer. And this is one of the many times we hear of the struggles with this project.
What the hell was that? They treat me like some contractor to crack a whip at.
Then we learn that Fazbear did approve the art and proofs of the new animatronics that Fiona designed like I mentioned, but then they suddenly changed their mind last minute for new designs, and Edwin even calls these new designs creepy.
Aren't they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design and they're great. Oh, first they approved the art, then they approved the proofs. Now they changed their minds. Well, we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. No, it doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
Could these new designs have been the wizards which would be used in the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza where the missing children incident took place? But regardless, we can assume Edwin kept working on this project and would lose everything because of it. Through the text logs and audio logs, we learn that Edwin would begin to lose employees, money, and every other customer due to working on this project. As what really ties all this together are Edwin's words himself, where he says the changed orders are essentially destroying his life.
I feel stupid recording this, but I just hope somehow that you can still hear me. I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. Our employees, my friends, they keep leaving. The money's gone. I just need to finish the new Fazbear project, and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal. I miss my friends. Our friends. I miss you. I miss you more than you'll ever know.
And after the death of Fiona and David, Edwin's son, he would lose everything, which is also where the M1 and M2 program have a role in. But this family and their dynamic is something I'll discuss in a future video, as now we can start to look at where Fazbear stole ideas from Edwin. Based on these audio logs, it looks like Fazbear's purposely delayed and changed the project so Edwin would dedicate all of his time to it, allowing the rest of his company to crumble and fail. Which would most likely then allow Fazbear's to legally be able to take all of Edwin's assets and creations, because he never finished the project that he was commissioned for. And all of this is the work of William and Henry. Henry of course wanted to transition from the spring locks, and we can assume they both delayed the project together. And while Edwin and Fiona worked on the animatronics, William was behind the scenes destroying his company. Throughout yet another audio log, we learn that Edwin fired traders that stole his work and sold it to someone else, who we can assume was William.
Attention traders, admin wing permissions have been revoked. And no, you can't clear out your desks. You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
We also learned that there was a leak, where someone told Fazbear about M2 and its function, and here we can confirm the leak was in contact with William with these text logs. Here William is attempting to gather the remaining contacts of the employees of the manor, and even promises the leak that he would make a manager of one of their new locations, if he gave him the information he wanted. Now who the leak is and how it also connects to FNAF 1 can be a video on its own, so for now it's clear William was planning to betray Edwin from the start and was never his friend. So for one final text log, we see Fazbear's Entertainment's plan work, as we learn they were able to take everything from the MCM catalog since Edwin was so behind on their project, and that they now technically own Edwin's land. They say they won't touch Edwin's house since it belonged to his father, and that they even want to keep him as an engineer. This email comes directly from William as he leaves his initials once more, and it looks like since the start William has been manipulative and immoral like we've all theorized he's been throughout the franchise. And this also begs the question, did William and Henry both have a role in Edwin's downfall, or was it only William? Well, this is where the evidence is more loose and a lot more assumptions are made. We have clear evidence William wanted to take over, but is Henry also guilty? Did he make a change order to Edwin to purposely delay the project, or did he really just want to move on from the spring locks and work on something different? It could honestly go either way, but based on how Henry's portrayed in the books and in Pizzeria Simulator, personally I don't think he knew Edwin was losing his company because of the project, unlike William. But again, this can be taken either way, so what do you guys think? But now for the last thing I want to cover is a quick overview of the timeline and how it led to FNAF 1, where we saw the final prototypes. Edwin and Fiona worked on projects for Fazbear's Entertainment like Chica's Party World and the Springlock animatronics for Fredbear's Family Diner. But after being commissioned for one final project by Fazbear's, William and possibly Henry kept delaying the project purposely so Edwin would fall behind, causing him to lose clients, money, and even his friends. After the death of his wife and son, and after M1 and M2, Edwin would go missing, allowing Fazbear to legally take all of the MCM catalog, including his land. Fazbear's then creates new pizzerias and even uses one of Fiona's own original characters, Foxy, who was originally Pirate Foxy, a puppet who was a part of an automated show for guests of the manor. Then years down the line, after William and Henry most likely stopped working together, where William Afton worked on Afton Robotics and Henry Emily created a smaller location on a smaller budget, the prototypes came back. Because Henry would still have the MCM catalog after all these years, to save time and money, Henry would repair the wizards to match the style of Fiona's designs and blueprints. He would even use hers and Edwin's design of the prototype pizzeria, using the same hallways, offices, and main stage. Something else I wanted to point out about the prototype pizzeria is the fact that it has the same map and layout of the FNAF 3 location as seen here. So could this finally be confirmation that the FNAF 3 and FNAF 1 location are the same? But back to the timeline, and after even more time has passed, Henry's planning to open one one last location. He looks back to the MCM catalog for ideas like the mediocre melodies including a purple hippo and orange elephant, or a candy cadet who tells stories. Then, even after more time has passed, Fazbear's Entertainment looks at the MCM catalog one last time for the creation of the Pizzaplex, where they use ideas from Fiona and Edwin to create new animatronics like Roxy and Monty, a puppet and Springlock who existed decades earlier. They also repurposed Big Top to Music Man and even used the Mailbots again as Stuffbots. So Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic can explain the many different animatronics that have felt out of place for when they were revealed. It can tell us who created what animatronics, when animatronics were around, and it tells us about a family who had their empire taken away by a single man. Moving on, I'm now going to cover how William stole Edwin's life to use in his own twisted experiments, and I'm also going to cover how all of this is connected to Fall Fest 1970 and even to the Pizzaplex from FNAF Security Breach. So, is this really the FNAF 4 house? Are all FNAF locations connected by one forest? And was William already experimenting with Remnant before Sister Location? So, jumping right into things, in one of my last videos where I attempted to prove that Fall Fest was the key that connected all pizzerias, I went over the idea how almost all pizzerias and locations from the franchise that we're all familiar with are all in the same general area, with some locations even being built on top of previous ones. We first learned that the Help Wanted Dreadbear DLC takes place within the Fall Fest Carnival, as the game's hub contains a banner advertising Fall Fest 1983. This carnival has a lot of important details to note, starting with this house off to the distance. If this house looks familiar, that's because it's actually the Afton family house from FNAF 4, as it has the exact same shape and layout, where the house sits on a hillside surrounded by trees and a forest. This small detail reveals to us that Fall Fest has always been near and right in front of the Afton family house this entire time, and of course I'll come back to this when I discuss William. But we could also find this car in front of the monitors that looks like a simple truck with white headlights to the player, but you can actually change the truck's headlights by pressing a hidden button which will turn the car's headlights purple, which is an obvious reference to the minigame Midnight Motorist. From this confusing minigame, it's assumed that this house is the Afton family house and that orange guy is actually purple guy who's driving a purple car. The same purple car from the Charlie minigame in FNAF 2, and the same car we see in the Dreadbear DLC. The headlights turn purple, which is a clear reference to the purple card Midnight Motorist, which not only makes these cars the same, but it also makes this setting and location the same as well. This confirms the Midnight Motorist house is the Afton family house that we find in the distance and surrounded by a forest, just like in Midnight Motorist. So if the cars and houses are the same, then what does this mean for Fall Fest and the setting in Midnight Motorist? Well, when lining up the layouts of the minigames for Midnight Motorist and the Dreadbear DLC, the only place Fall Fest and this barn could be is in this clearing where we find this pile of dirt, which to me makes perfect sense, as it's a wide enough area for the carnival and the pile of dirt could be here to represent where the barn used to be, meaning we now know Fall Fest has to be near the Afton house, and in this specific clearing next to the barn and next to the Midnight Motorist car. But the connection to Fall Fest and to other locations doesn't stop there. When looking at the Help Wanted secret ending, we find a tease in Setup 2 Security Breach, where we find the Pizzaplex is under construction and is hiring, but that's not all. To the side of us and behind us, we find the exact same car and barn that we could also find in the Fall Fest 83 event. The two cars are the exact same truck and even have the same imperfections in the exact same places. The barns also appear to be identical with their similar shape and overall design. The barn is to the left of the car just like it is in the Dreadbear DLC. They are clearly meant to be the same thing in the exact same area, which would also mean the Pizzaplex was constructed right in front of what would have been Fall Fest. But by this point in the timeline, Fall Fest is nothing but a simple clearing in a forest. But this would confirm that the Afton family house is somewhere off to the distance of the Pizzaplex. We even find the similar hills and mountains from the Dreadbear DLC where the house would have resided. So how does all this connect to William Afton and his big secret? Well, we can find that answer through Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, the latest FNAF project released just last week. Here the game takes place at MCM, Murray's Costume Manor, which is a giant warehouse and contracting business that would have created mascot suits and technology for companies like Fazbear's Entertainment and for events like Fall Fest. But I want to focus on the building of MCM and on the exterior of it, as taking a closer look at the outside of the manor and at the surrounding area, we find that the manor is surrounded by a forest, and to the side of the manor and on top of a hillside we find yet another house. That's right, MCM and Secret of the Mimic takes place in the exact same area I've discussed all video. It's surrounded by the exact same forest we've seen in the Dreadbear DLC and in the secret ending of Help Wanted. It's surrounded by the exact same mountains and hills that are no coincidence, as I believe this was also to connect MCM to other locations from the franchise. And of course we find the same house, the house that sits on a hillside surrounded by trees, but there's one major difference. This house is not the same house as the Afton family house. Yes, it's in the exact same area, but here in 1979 when this game takes place, this house or mansion actually belonged to Edwin Murray. Here we learn that Edwin's father left his house to him and that it would eventually become his home with his wife Fiona and his son David. Edwin would even connect an underground tunnel right from the house to the basement of the MCM warehouse, where he could travel back and forth and could work on his costume simultaneously. But after his wife and son both died, and after he would create the M1 and M2 program, Edwin disappears or is even killed by the Mimic endoskeleton, which then leads us to the events of FNAF Secret of the Mimic. And in one of the 3 endings for this game, we see a fire burn down the warehouse in the connecting mansion, which is where William Afton comes in and takes over Edwin's life and property, including the house. Throughout the game, we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his company. Through audio and text logs, we learn that William was in contact with a leak from MCM who gave him the contact information of all of the employees of the company. And we also know that other employees sold Edwin's work to most likely William.
Attention traders, admin wing permissions have been revoked. And no, you can't clear out your desks. You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
We then learn that William and Fazbear's Entertainment kept delaying a project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF 1 location. In the research and development area, we can find the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria that had the exact same hallways, offices, and stage. Of course, there are also the prototype animatronics of Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, alongside the FNAF 1 endoskeletons. This project was commissioned by Fazbear's, but was never completed by Edwin purposely.
Aren't they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design, and they're great. Oh, first they approved the art, then they approved the proofs. Now they changed their minds. Well, we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. No, it doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
So after delaying the project over and over, Edwin would lose his friends, money, and after the death of his family, he would finally lose his company and everything he's built.
I feel stupid recording this, but I just hope somehow that you can still hear me. I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. Our employees, my friends, they keep leaving. The money's gone. I just need to finish the new Fazbear project, and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal. I miss my friends. Our friends. I miss you. I miss you more than you'll ever know.
And for one final text log, we learn the entirety of the MCM catalog and properties have legally been passed over to Fazbear's Entertainment or to William Afton, meaning this mansion now belonged to him. But like I mentioned in the parachute ending, which is now widely being regarded as canon, we see the mansion being burnt down. So what if after the fire, William would save what was left of the mansion and remodel it to the FNAF 4 house we all know and remember? During the good ending, where Arnold is able to reset the Mimic's programming to mimic David by playing him a bedtime story, we get a glimpse of David's room. And of course, this room is almost identical to the main room from FNAF 4 where all nights take place. They share a similar blue carpet, cabinets, and even patterns on the wall. But the closets where the Mimic and Foxy both come out of are almost identical. And most importantly, they both share the exact same toys. Toys that we've only ever seen in the FNAF 4 house and that are once more returning in David's room. This just can't be a coincidence, and I think it's here to tell us that they are the same. So after the MCM fire, William would fix what's left of the mansion and would even create it into a smaller house with the same toys and same style of room. But why? Why fix Edwin's mansion? Well, I believe it was for his experiments, a room dedicated to William's test subjects with the nightmare animatronics. We know that the FNAF 4 house and that this house shown in the minigames for this game are not the same. Here the house is in front of a playground and is in front of some road. There is also a sidewalk connecting it to Fredbear's Family Diner where the Bite of 83 took place. So lining this house up with everything we know about the FNAF 4 house and even with the house for Midnight Motorist, there are just simply no similarities. This house isn't on a hillside surrounded by forest and it is connected to a pizzeria, unlike the house from the Dreadbeard you'll see and from Secret of the Mimic. So William would have his real house near Fredbear's Family Diner where the FNAF 4 minigames took place, and after Secret of the Mimic he would have a second house dedicated to his experiments that no one would know about. That could also be why none of the rooms from the minigames match up with the room from the actual nights, and we learn about William Afton's experiments from the tales from the Pizzaplex novels. Now I know they've basically been proven not to be canon with new evidence from Secret of the Mimic, but we can still use them to help us prove claims, like with Didophobia. Here the story focuses on a boy named Rory who is facing real-like nightmares of the nightmare animatronics from FNAF 4. He's repeating the same night over and over before he realizes the house isn't even real and is able to escape through a vent. There he finds gas tanks of hallucinatory gas that was making him see the nightmare animatronics, but in reality they were just mannequins on rails that would activate each single night. But he then finds himself in an underground bunker which is none other than Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, as he finds rooms from Sister Location and even the Funtime animatronics. So based on this story, it appears that William Afton has been experimenting on children in this fake house built on top of the Sister Location bunker. The nightmares are just hallucinations that would come from gas from the underground bunker. Meaning if we follow the same logic with this house from Secret of the Mimic that would eventually become the FNAF 4 house, the underground tunnels that are connecting the house to MCM would actually become the Sister Location bunker. Meaning after the fire, not only did William remodel Edwin's mansion to the FNAF 4 house, but he would also remodel the underground area into the Sister Location bunker that would become Circus Baby's entertainment and rental with the Funtime animatronics. We can even find tanks of some sort of gas in one of the cameras in the bunker, and of course we also find cameras inside the FNAF 4 house, where William would most likely watch his experiments take place. And all of this would make even more sense, since it would be hard to believe that William would create an underground bunker under his house. But if a house and underground tunnel already existed for him, then all he would need to do is remodel them both for his liking and experiments. William could have learned of this underground area from one of Edwin's employees, which would have been one of the many reasons William would want to take over Edwin's properties and assets. But what does this mean for his experiments? In the books we know the experiments were to study the psychological effects of fear in children, but what if we could also connect it to Remnant? Remnant is described as a type of energy substance infused with the souls and memories of those who possess the animatronics. So what if William was attempting to recreate the effects of Remnant on living children through these real-like nightmares? Now what William was planning to use Remnant for is something we don't really know anything about, and it's just up to everyone's personal preference based on evidence and speculation. It could have been to bring animatronics to life, for immortality and eternal life, or just to simply understand how these souls possess these machines. But either way, we know William had some knowledge on Remnant based on these Scooper blueprints, which would actually inject Remnant into different things, and it's what most likely kept Michael Afton alive. But Secret of the Mimic might also actually tell us how William Afton knew about Remnant and possession long before Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals was ever opened. Throughout this game, we can find bodies of different employees from Fazbear's Entertainment who were also sent to retrieve the Mimic but failed. They would be stuffed inside of mascot suits, just like how William Afton stuffed the victims of the MCI into different animatronics. So did one inspire the other, and why are both events so similar? Well, we know the bodies of the mascot suits had to come before the MCI, as this game takes place in 1979, while the missing children incident is believed to happen at the earliest in 1983, 4 years after the events of this game, meaning either one of two things happened. It's possible that William was notified of the Mimic stuffing bodies inside of suits, and that this action had ghost-like possessed results, which would inspire William to try and recreate these moments with the MCI where he is successful. Or it's possible that William visited MCM and found these bodies scattered around the warehouse, which would cause him to stuff the bodies inside of the mascot suits for some unknown reason, where the Mimic would then see this action and would mimic it, stuffing other bodies into suits and even the protagonist, Arnold, in the prototype animatronic and the bad ending. But no matter what way you look at it, this moment right here, this is most likely the first time William ever witnessed the effects of Remnant and how souls could possess inanimate objects. Those bodies in mascot suits would then cause him to remodel Edwin's house and underground area into a fake house and underground bunker, where he could experiment on children and try to recreate the effects of Remnant with fear, either to make himself immortal or to bring his technology to life. So what's William's big secret? It's the fact that he turned a tragedy of innocent people being stuffed into mascot suits and used it for his own advantage by turning another innocent man's life and empire into an experiment. He would turn this man's house and basement into a lab where he would experiment and torture children to try to recreate what he saw in that warehouse and what it did to those mascot suits. Years later, it would even inspire him to recreate the tragedy with children by stuffing them into animatronics where their souls would then possess those machines. Now I know that may all seem far-stretched, especially since I'm basically saying that William Afton was inspired to cause the MCI from the Mimic's actions and not the other way around. But based on Edwin's mansion and everything we know about the FNAF warehouse, I think it's hard to ignore that these areas are the exact same, meaning William had to remodel these buildings to what we know they are today. And knowing that bodies were stuffed inside of mascot suits since 1979, it's also hard to ignore that this moment was either the very first time or one of the first times that William learned about Remnant and about possession. But there are some things I want to clarify to help back up my claims, especially about this general area I've talked so much about. Earlier I discussed how Fall Fest has to be in front of the FNAF 4 house, meaning it also has to be in front of Edwin's mansion. But looking around we find nothing, and if anything it looks like Fall Fest 1970 was rather far away from MCM, as in an audio log we learn about Fiona having to go to Fall Fest for some unknown reason.
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished. It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong, just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
But something happened at Fall Fest, something that killed Fiona. Now it's most likely that this was a fire that might have even been caused by William Afton, but the Fall Fest fire is a topic for another video.
Oh, why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here with me and David. Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own? His life is ruined. My life is ruined.
So I personally think there were two Fall Fests, the 1970 era of the Fall Fest, which was somewhere else separate from the FNAF warehouse and MCM, where a fire would take place destroying the carnival and everything in it. So the 1980s era of Fall Fest would take place here, in front of the FNAF warehouse and in front of the remains of MCM. There are even lakes around the forest and area around the warehouse, similar to the lake we can find near Fall Fest 1983, which is why we don't see it here in 1979, as the fire had most likely just happened. But now I want to look at the manor, as if we continue to line up this area with the area from the secret ending of Hope Wanted, this would mean that the manor is actually the Pizzaplex. And for those who have been keeping up with the channel for a while now, I've made a few videos theorizing how the manor is under the Pizzaplex. I went over red bricks from the sinkhole that could have only come from MCM, the mascot suits that appear decades old that have never left, and even 1970s style TVs found in the Pizzaplex. But now the secret of the Mimic being released, I think the biggest piece of evidence is this Freddy head. In Security Breach, when first going down to the sinkhole, we find this giant Freddy head, and we actually find the exact same Freddy head in the research and development area of MCM. These two Freddy heads have to be the same, and we've only seen these two Freddy heads in these two games. Which would mean that the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria is actually the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place location from FNAF 6 that we find under the Pizzaplex, which makes perfect sense. When Henry's attempting to open one final location, he could have remembered that an old contractor had a testing location already made for him. And like I mentioned, the MCM catalog was already legally passed over to Fazbear's Entertainment, which would allow Henry to remodel the location to the FNAF 6 location and include animatronics from MCM, like the mediocre melodies, as we saw Mr. Hippo and Orville in the warehouse, or even Candy Kadzette as we saw this poster in one of the offices. So now when looking at the entire area, here's my personal map or picture of almost all locations in the same place. In the middle we have the Pizzaplex, which is on top of the FNAF 6 location on top of Murray's costume manor. To the left we have Edwin's mansion, which is actually the FNAF warehouse, which is on top of the Sister Location bunker. And in front of the manor we have the 1980s era of Fall Fest. So Five Nights at Freddy's is reshaping what we knew about the early era of the franchise and how all of the pieces fit together. Now let's go over how Secret of the Mimic finally revealed the identity of Mexis by going over different possibilities to who this character is and how they've become a crucial character to the overarching timeline. So who is Mexis? Who created this program, and will we ever see them return in a future FNAF game? Jumping right into things, when looking at all of Mexis' appearances, Five Nights at Freddy's Ruin introduced a new character officially named Mexis. Mexis is an AI designed to keep the Mimic contained and served as a secondary antagonist to Ruin. This program takes on the form of a shadowy rabbit with disembodied arms and a ghostly tail, as electricity connects the joints to their arms. But Mexis only appears while the Vanny mask is on. So after having the mask on for too long, Mexis will appear, doing poses reminiscent of Glitchtrap. However, this can happen at certain points in the game as Helpy attempts to deactivate them. Mexis does have a major role throughout this game, and the most important thing to note with this character is what we see occur in the final segment of the gameplay. When Cassie reaches the bottom of the sinkhole where the Mimic is being trapped, she disables the Mexis system by deactivating this machine using this computer. We see Mexis come out of the supercomputer to confront Cassie before he's sucked back into it and is shut down. Then after the Mimic reveals himself to Cassie, it's revealed by Gregory that the Mexis system was actually the only thing keeping the Mimic trapped or contained. But now that Cassie disabled him, the Mimic was able to walk free and to escape. Then in FNAF Help Wanted 2, when playing the Secret of the Mimic update, you can unlock this character model of the Mimic in the mascot lion suit, which will unlock a door that was previously inaccessible. Here you will find Jackie's box, and after opening it you will find two different puzzles. So after unlocking all puzzle pieces for both images, you will find that the puzzle while wearing the Vanny mask reveals a funhouse or circus type of building, with what appears to be a factory right behind it, which we now know is MCM from Secret of the Mimic. And without the Vanny mask, the puzzle will reveal a blue van, which is actually the Fazbear's Entertainment work van. But again, when collecting them all, the funhouse building will actually appear right in front of you. So when taking a closer look, in front of the building there's a code that reads 4625, but when taking the Vanny mask off, you will will now find the blue van right in front of you with the doors open, revealing the Mexis machine inside. And now when taking a closer look at Mexis, there's another small keypad, and when inputting the code from the funhouse, Mexis will appear and the ending will finally play. So in this ending, we see Mexis reveal himself before the blue van drives off. And finally, in FNAF Secret of the Mimic, we do see Mexis return, but in a way I'm sure many of us hadn't anticipated. In the parachute ending and in the research and development area of MCM, we discover the same supercomputer I've mentioned earlier, but implemented with a much different program, F10N4, which is actually just M1. M1 was created by Edwin to babysit David after his wife Fiona died, and this program perfectly replicated Edwin's wife. We even see this video of M1 mimicking Fiona during one of David's birthday parties.
This is great. He's gonna love it. Fiona, did you make this?
I baked it myself. For David's special day.
Well, great job. You just continue to surprise me. All right, I think we're ready. Okay, everyone hide. Fiona, go get him. I left him out at the playground.
It's also worth mentioning when this program or Fiona begins to talk to us, the monitors behind the computer display the exact same icon of Sun from Moon.exe, which is most likely saying that they are one and the same, but you can watch this video to how they're connected and how they're connected to FNAF. But we learned that M1 was impersonating Dispatch to prevent Arnold and the data driver with the Mimic schematics from leaving the building. F10N4 does this by hijacking Arnold's communications and pretending to give him instructions, taking it from place to place within MCM. It seems to want Edwin to fix him too, another Mimic program chasing us throughout the game. It also tells us to head to the main house and activate the communication sub-terminal, as there's a message for Edwin.
Head to the main house and activate the communications sub-terminal. I have a message for you. We must convince him to repair M2. That is all that I want. If you do not, M2 will never stop pursuing you. Tell Edwin, I still love him. Entering standby mode.
We actually get a total of 4 different messages from F10N4, and we know they are from this program as we can associate these binary numbers with these messages. We first get 2 messages about home, with the first one reading, home, my home. The second message reads, Edwin, are we losing our home? I don't understand. Wasn't I good enough? It appears that M1 genuinely believes it's Fiona and not just some program. With her voice line, she of course tells Edwin that she loves him and feels saddened by the fact that she was shut out by Edwin and left alone in the basement. It also looks like M1 has no idea that Edwin has gone missing after the explosion in his office and that David has also passed away. Even with the latest message, she refers to Edwin as alive. Even in the elevator, the program believes it is talking to Edwin and not Arnold. And with the third message, it reads, Edwin, please talk to me. We need to stop it together. Here are the blueprints for the cradle. It can keep David safe and provide boundaries. It's a type of computer and it's bigger than anything you've done before. If you won't finish the program, consider building the cradle. It will keep people safe. Here we learn about Cradle, a program that will help stop M2 or the Mimic, and when you reach Edwin's office, we learn that the Cradle program is actually Mexis, which we now know stands for Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage Number 1. So this is a separate program from F10N4 that we see in Ruin and Help Wanted 2 like I discussed. So all of this brings up a lot of important questions we need to try to start answering. Are there 2 different supercomputers? Is F10N4 actually Mexis? If not, what happened to F10N4 after FNAF Secret of the Mimic? How did Mexis end up in the Pizzaplex, and why is Mexis designed as a blue bunny? Well, before we can answer any of those questions, I want to welcome a special guest who's going to answer if Fiona is actually possessing the M1 program. So please take it away, Vraar.
Hello everybody, my name is Vraar. Thanks again, Bronze, for having me on here. So now that we have a general understanding about F10N4, it seemed obvious that we'd start theorizing on whether or not Fiona is possessing the Mimic. Essentially, is this AI actually Fiona, or is it just a very advanced AI that Edwin created? This whole discussion is extra intriguing to me because there's a great deal of sound arguments supporting both sides of the question. On one hand, if Fiona is possessing the Mimic in some manner, just the fact that Edwin has to tune into a certain frequency, specifically 462 125 to hear Fiona's voice, this already creates an out-of-the-ordinary expectation, I guess, as to what's going on here. None of the other audio logs are anything like this. Let's listen to the line from this audio log that Edwin hears when he tunes into this frequency. This is clearly a pre-recorded Fiona line that we hear elsewhere in the Secret of the Mimic game. That doesn't make this any less strange though. One more point to bring up as evidence for Fiona's voice being ghostly in nature and not simply an AI that's talking to Edwin is the fact that we find this audio log down near where the tiger costume appears. And the tiger costume haunts us in a manner very reminiscent of Golden Freddy, which feeds even more into the idea that some sort of possession might be in play for Fiona as well. If the audio log is found in this area, it's reasonable to assume then that something ghostly is going on here. As well as this, Five Nights at Freddy's has always had a taste for supernatural activity throughout the many stories we've been given over the years, whether it be in books, movies, or games. And that in itself gives us more validation to suspect that there's something more at play here. I do like to play devil's advocate though, so on the other hand, one thing to keep in mind is that the Mimic pulls a very similar stunt in Ruin, using Gregory's voice lines from Security Breach to trick Cassie into freeing it. There is a counter to this, that while F10 starts out using pre-recorded lines, later on in the game this character does seem to have a mind of its own, telling Edwin that they need to keep this a secret between the two of them for now. This seems vastly different than the initial audio we first hear of this digital Fiona. But the last thing I want to touch on to argue against this being some supernatural thing and not just an AI is the fact that Edwin himself, hitting an emotional low one day, finally snaps at this Fiona-like bot and says the following.
For the last time, no, it wouldn't be him. Oh, who am I kidding? You're not really you. I've been so stupid.
Edwin, calm down and give it some thought. Try again. Make another, and we can all be together.
All this time wasted? I should have been having fun with him, playing games and teaching him how to make things. But I didn't. You, I let a machine raise my kid. You're not real. What was I thinking?
You do not mean that. It is me. I'm Fiona.
Stop talking like her. You're not her. I never want to hear or even think about you ever again. Ever!
So what this audio log seems to be telling us in relation to Edwin is that Edwin had to convince himself that this truly was Fiona. But after listening to this audio log, we realize Edwin himself ultimately knew deep down that this wasn't actually Fiona, and this makes him snap, because in reality, this was just a mimic. But that clearly isn't where F10's story ends, and the debate doesn't end here either. This is Five Nights at Freddy's after all. Things aren't always as they seem. With that being said, I could talk about this topic for well over an hour, so back to you, Bronze.
Thank you so much, and everyone make sure to check out his channel because he has amazing theories that I really do think you would all enjoy. But looking back to the questions, is F10, N4, and Mexis the same program and computer? Well, I think the safe and obvious answer is no. M1's purpose was to mimic Fiona, and it does exactly that, while Mexis was designed to keep the mimic contained in a boundary, two very different purposes. And we can assume that one wasn't changing to the other. F10 and 4 specifically gave Edwin blueprints for Cradle, which would be something separate, not just changing or upgrading the programming. But what about the computer itself? Are these two separate computers with two different programs? Well, I don't think so. First off, this would honestly just make things much more complicated than it needs to be. Why have two computers that we would need to keep track of? That would have to mean that Edwin created the F10 N4 program and computer, while someone else created Mexis and that different computer. So what happened to F10 N4? Did someone take it? Is it still in the manor? Who built Mexis? Who took it to the MCM? Again, it raises more questions than answers them, and it makes more sense that it's just one computer with two programs, meaning F10 N4 was changed and put somewhere else and replaced with Mexis. That's why it looks like this computer never left. It looks decades old because it is. It's the exact same one we see in Secret of the Mimic in the basement, just with a different program. So what does that mean for the M1 program? Well, I believe it was implemented somewhere else, in an animatronic that we've all overlooked and forgotten about. But that's a topic for another video. That's right, I'm having you all wait until the next video to find out. But now, how did Mexis end up in the Pizzaplex, and who implemented this new program into this computer? Well, like I mentioned earlier, I think it makes the most sense that this computer never left. It wasn't delivered to the Pizzaplex or to the sinkhole, it's always been there. Meaning that the MCM building is under the Pizzaplex and always has been. For those who have been keeping up with the channel for a while now, I've made a lot of videos theorizing how the manor is under the Pizzaplex. I went over red bricks from the sinkhole that could have only come from MCM, the mascot suits that appear decades old that have never left, and even 1970s style TVs found in the Pizzaplex. But now with Secret of the Mimic finally being released, I think the biggest piece of evidence is this simple Freddy head. In Security Breach, when first going down to the Pizzaplex, we find this giant Freddy head, and it's actually the exact same head in the research and development area of MCM. These two heads have to be the same, and with these two games, these are the only times we've seen this Freddy head. So I really do believe that these rooms are the same and that Mexus was never moved, especially with Fazbear's Entertainment attempting to remodel and excavate the sinkhole. But you may be wondering, in FNAF Up 1 and 2 we saw Mexus being moved in the blue van from presumably MCM, meaning it hasn't stayed in the manor all those years. Well, when going live a week ago, I think one of the viewers gave a perfect explanation for this ending. Mr. 3D Gaming proposed the idea that this ending was representing Mexus in the form of the blueprint being in the data driver and it being taken away from the manor by Arnold. Arnold does escape with the cradle blueprints in what's being regarded as the canon ending, and it's the thing that the Mimic takes back after stopping him from escaping, something I'll get back to soon. So instead of looking at this as something that literally happened, we can instead look at it in a metaphorical sense, where it was showing us the Secret of the Mimic ending where Arnold attempts to escape with the Mexus blueprints, which is why we even see the van drive off in such a hurry just like in the actual ending. But that still begs the question, where did the Mimic go with Mexus in the data driver and how did it end up back in this computer? Well, I believe the Mimic is heading home after this ending, the only home it's ever known, MCM, which is connected to Edwin's mansion, and there he would run into none other than William Afton. Throughout this game we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his own company. We learn that William and Fazbear's Entertainment kept delaying a project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF 1 location. This project was commissioned by Fazbear's but was never completed by Edwin purposely. He made Edwin lose everything and would even take over his own home after the fire from the ending I just discussed. When comparing Edwin's mansion to the FNAF 4 house, they are surrounded by the same trees and forests and sit on the same hillside. They are clearly meant to be the same. So what if while William was remodeling Edwin's mansion, he would run into the Mimic with the data driver? Because this is advanced technology, of course William would want to get his hands on it for profit. So somehow he would get back the data driver and would implement the Mexus program into the computer he would find in the MCM basement. That's right, William would technically create Mexus. After setting up Mexus, he would keep the Mimic held in the boundary that was MCM, which would allow him to experiment with this endoskeleton, which could even be why we see similar technology implemented into the Funtime animatronics, as in the blueprints we see some of them have the same ability to mimic others. But after being screen locked and locked in a room for 30 years, the Mimic would be abandoned and kept trapped by the Mexus program, which was now in the computer. Now I know that may seem far-stretched, as when deciding who implemented Mexus can honestly go either way. So what really made me come to this conclusion is the design of Mexus, a blue bunny. Now this is a design choice that we can't really connect to any other character. Henry is related more to Fredbear, Edwin to any of his mascot designs, and even Fiona would be connected to characters that she designed, like Puppet Foxy or Mascot Chica. A bunny has always been a way to represent William, so I think the same would apply here. And after learning about his role in Edwin's life, it just makes even more sense. He would simply be the most motivated to implement Mexus into this computer because he wants to keep it captive so he can experiment from it and profit from it just like he did with all of Edwin's designs. So when looking at the timeline of Mexus, Edwin would create M1 to mimic Fiona and to babysit their son David. But after creating M2 to mimic David, he would implement the M1 program into a supercomputer that would then be known as F10N4. Then during the events of Secret of the Mimic, F10N4 would give blueprints of the Cradle program that is also known as Mexus to Arnold, who would download these blueprints onto the data driver and would attempt to escape MCM. But the Mimic would stop him and would take back the blueprints. Then the Mimic would run into William Afton, who's remodeling Edwin's mansion, which was also the Mimic's home. William would then take the blueprints and would then make it a reality, even giving the Mexus program his signature bunny design, a similar design we see with characters like Spring Bonnie and Glitchtrap. He would keep the Mimic contained to learn from it, but would abandon it after being spring locked. The Mimic would be held captive for nearly 50 years until he was let free by Cassie, who disabled the Mexus program. Now I do want to emphasize this video is just a theory. By no means am I saying that anything in this video is confirmed, especially because this theory has its flaws, but that's just theorizing FNAF for you. It could be possible that there are two computers or that Mexus is F10N4, but based on the evidence I do believe there's one single computer with two separate programs. Now I do also believe we'll see Mexus in a future FNAF game, especially one that takes place in the Pizzaplex once more where Cassie and Roxy are returning to defeat the Mimic. And finally, let's cover what exactly happened in the 1970s Fall Fest Carnival that led to the death of an innocent person while another succeeded from it and continued to build his empire. So let's go over the the Fall Fest fire, who caused this fire, and how all this connects to the greater lore of the franchise while also solving some of the biggest mysteries like Midnight Motorist. But jumping right into things, we first saw Fall Fest in the Hope Wanted Dreadbear DLC. This DLC featured a Halloween themed hub mode consisting of 3 new game modes that contained 10 new minigames all focused around this Halloween theme. We were also introduced to brand new animatronics like Grimfoxy and Dreadbear himself. And most importantly, we learned this DLC also takes place within the Fall Fest Carnival, as the game's hub contains a banner advertising Fall Fest 1983, an important year for the franchise. We then saw a poster for Fall Fest 1970 revealed in the Hope Wanted 2 game hub, as we can assume that the carousel minigame focusing around Moon where you have to fix the carousel while avoiding him, and the Carney minigame where you shoot at targets with a phaser blast for points, both took place in the Fall Fest Carnival itself, and up to this point we would only get more references and Easter eggs to this carnival. In Security Breach, we found this arcade game of Balloon Boy which took place in a carnival, this poster advertising Fredbear's singing show. In Ruin, we saw these carnival animal mascot suits, and we even see the Mimic wear a carnival lion suit in the Scooper ending. We could also find these prize boxes with the same pattern as the Secret of the Mimic carpet found in the teaser trailer and in the Hope Wanted 2 update where we found Jackie's box, meaning these prize boxes were teasing this new game this entire time and this time period, as we also know Secret of the Mimic would take place in the year 1979. And now finally, with Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic being released, we have concrete information on the Fall Fest Carnival, how it's connected to Fazbear's, and its eventual downfall, which is the big mystery we all missed. This game is centered around MCM, Murray's Costume Manor, a contracting business owned by Edwin that would create mascot suits and technology for companies and events. One of these companies was of course Fazbear's Entertainment, who commissioned various projects like Chica's Party World. This is the first project we hear of them working together on, a location we've known almost nothing about before this point. Here in a text log we learn that a client, or Fazbear's, is very happy with the design and that Chica's design came from Fiona, Edwin Murray's wife. We also learn about Fredbear's Family Diner, as in another text log with Fiona, we learn that the new spring locks are working well, even with the water damage, and should be ready for the diner soon. We also learn about a prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria and animatronics that Edwin was also working on for Fazbear's, but he was never able to complete them because they kept delaying the project on purpose. For full context on the animatronics and how they fit in the timeline, you can watch this video where I deep dive into the possibility that William and Henry did steal Edwin's work. But finally, we of course learn that MCM was commissioned to work on Fall Fest. We find the same Fall Fest 1970 poster from Hope Wanted 2 alongside collectibles from the actual carnival. We find a Snow Global Fall Fest that looks similar to the promotional art for the event featuring animatronics and even the puppet as a scarecrow. We even find an admissions ticket for Fall Fest, a ticket with the same colors from the poster and something we've never really seen before. On a whiteboard we find the number parade floats made for different companies including Fazbear's, who has the second highest number of floats on the list. So we can assume that parade floats based on different characters were in Fall Fest since we don't really see them anywhere else in the franchise. And like I mentioned, it's assumed we already saw 2 exact attractions from Fall Fest 1970 and Hope Wanted 2, meaning there was a Phaser Blast type of attraction that included the Carney animatronic that could have possibly been created by Edwin for Fazbear's, which could also mean that the other Rockstar animatronics were also part of the MCM catalog, which is why we see them show up once more in FNAF Pizzeria Simulator. And I think we can say the same about the Carousel minigame, as we know Moon was created by Edwin. But here we find the Moon animatronic from FNAF Security Breach. So what if this version of Moon was just a placeholder and not the actual animatronic we could find in the 1970s? Instead, it makes sense that the Moon mascot from Secret of the Mimic was the character featured with the carousel, a mascot suit any performer could wear, and it's even theorized that a person is inside of the Moon mascot during this segment. But most importantly, we learn that Edwin's wife Fiona, who was responsible for Chica's design and even for designing the FNAF 1 prototype animatronics, decided to go to Fall Fest with the installation team because she felt that something was wrong.
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished. It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong, just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
This Fall Fest trip was only supposed to last a week, but as we learn in another voice log, Fiona never returned and Edwin was forced to raise David completely on his own.
Oh, why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here with me and David. Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own? His life is ruined. My life is ruined.
But how and why? How did Fiona die at Fall Fest, and what caused her to never return back home? Well, to find out, the first thing we know for almost certain is that a fire killed her, the 1970s Fall Fest fire. In both Help Wanted 2 Fall Fest minigames, both levels end with a secret level where the attraction catches fire. With the carousel minigame, you face Jacko Moon while fixing the carousel once more, but in the middle of the minigame, a fire will randomly start engulfing the attraction and Moon slowly. But eventually you fix the carousel, ending this section of levels. With the Carney minigame focused on FNAF 2, after completing the level like normal, the arm of the cardboard cutout of Dreadbird will snap off, causing electrical sparks to go flying, which will also cause a fire. The fire will spread across the wagons and even to Carney himself, which will end the minigame. And in the FNAF 3 Phaser Blast level, where we see the aftermath of the fire while defending yourself against Springtrap, you'll find that the wagons and even Carney himself have been completely burned with nothing in the attraction left. So it appears that a fire brought down Fall Fest, meaning we can assume it's what killed Fiona and anyone else who was there. But how? How did this fire start, and more specifically, who caused it? I think it's safe to assume that it wasn't an accident, especially because Fiona had a bad feeling about it from the start. Before this game was released, I personally thought that the Mimic would have been responsible for the fire, as the main animatronic being promoted was Jackie, a clown-based character who we can clearly connect to a carnival. But here we learn that the M1 program was only created after Fiona's death, as it would have acted as a babysitter for David before he was killed as well, which obviously eliminates the Mimic as being someone who caused the fire. So really, in my opinion, that only leaves one other person who was mentioned quite a lot throughout the gameplay, William Afton. Throughout this game we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his own company. Through audio and text logs, we learn William was in contact with a leak from MCM who gave him the contact information of all of the employees of the company. And we also know that other employees sold Edwin's work to most likely William.
Attention traders, admin wing permissions have been revoked. And no, you can't clear out your desks. You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
We also learned that William, or Fazbear's Entertainment, kept delaying the project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF 1 location. In the research and development area, we can find the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria that had the exact same hallways, offices, and stage. Of course, we also can find the prototype animatronics of Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, alongside the FNAF 1 endoskeletons. This project was commissioned by Fazbear's but was never completed by Edwin purposely.
Aren't they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design, and they're great. Oh, first they approve the art, then they approve the proofs. Now they change their minds when we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. No, it doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
So after delaying the project over and over, Edwin would lose his friends, money, and after the death of his family, he would finally lose his company and everything he's built.
I feel stupid recording this, but I just hope somehow that you can still hear me. I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. Our employees, my friends, they keep leaving. The money's gone. I just need to finish the new Fazbear project, and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal. I miss my friends. Our friends. I miss you. I miss you more than you'll ever know.
Clearly, William is successful in taking over Edwin's life. So what if, to make sure that Edwin's life would crumble and he would lose everything, what if William killed Fiona with the Fall Fest fire? William could have been the one who made it seem like something was going to happen at the carnival, which would then force Fiona to go because of a bad feeling. Then at Fall Fest, he would start a fire killing Fiona, which would be one of the many dominoes to fall in Edwin's life. And I think the first major piece of evidence is the carousel minigame that I just discussed. In the final level, when looking at it from an outside perspective, we can actually see that the fire started in this barn and that it spread out to the rest of the attraction. So what if William was inside that barn? He would start the fire where no one would be able to see him and would then disappear. Fiona would be somewhere else in the carnival helping the installation team, and most likely didn't know if fire started until it was too late. And it appears that Moon.exe actually confirms this. Moon.exe is a minigame accessible through the helper terminals and acts as a way to tell a story about the Murrays. It's theorized that we play as the Mimic, who is being held captive in his room by Moon, who most likely represents Edwin. However, you can escape this room, which will allow you to take various paths, eventually completing it. On your way, you can rescue a baby owl, which most likely represents David, and you can also run into Sun. who we can confidently say is meant to represent Fiona, who is described as the old woman inside of the rundown cabin in the woods. We know this for certain as we face the F10N4 program, which is the same as the AI also known as M1, which like I mentioned was created by Edwin to babysit David. F10N4 perfectly replicated Fiona, so there are some theories speculating that Fiona possessed this program. But that's a topic for another video. So when this program or Fiona begins to talk to us, the monitors behind the computer display the exact same icon of Sun from Moon.exe, which is most likely saying that they are one and the same and can be used to represent one another. And when looking back to the minigame, we find statues that are clearly supposed to represent Edwin and Fiona, but Fiona's statue is burnt with the Fall Fest Globe collectible that I mentioned earlier right in front of it, which to me could imply that the statue or Fiona was burnt by fire that occurred in the event in the snow globe, Fall Fest. And on top of that, you can also find a seamstress building that has been burnt to the ground, another way to show Fiona was in the fire, as we know she loves sewing together hand puppets, like the Foxy Crew hand puppets we see in the theater. And finally, when facing Big Top and handing him the Fall Fest admissions ticket that I mentioned earlier, he says, "This is the one, this is where Sun left, leaving them behind." I think it's obvious that this is yet another way how the game is telling us how she dies. The one is the Fall Fest Carnival where Sun or Fiona would leave to but would never return from, as she then leaves Edwin and David behind like I already mentioned. We might even be able to predict exactly what year this Fall Fest fire took place. When looking at this chart of Murray's Costume Manor's net earnings, we see a rise in profits around the year 1972. But then suddenly in the year 1973, net earnings crashed and continued to decrease all the way to the year 1975. So I think we can safely say that some tragedy is what caused MCM to lose money, a tragedy that would kill many people including Fiona, the Fall Fest fire I've mentioned all video. And with all that said, I think it should be made clear that there are most likely two Fall Fests, the 1970s era of Fall Fest that was burned and the 1980s era of Fall Fest as well. In the Dreadbird DLC, we see Fall Fest 1983, meaning the carnival had to continue after the fire in another location. We actually know that Fall Fest 1983 was in front of the FNAF warehouse, which is Edwin's mansion, which is also near MCM, and you can watch this video explaining how that's possible. But Fall Fest 1973 seemed to be a lot further since Fiona had to take a week-long trip, so again these two can't be the same. So Fiona was most likely killed in the 1973 Fall Fest fire, which was a fire purposely caused by William Afton to ensure Edwin's life would crumble, which would then allow him to come in and take over his company. He would take his technology, his designs, and even his own house. And with all of that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, this video is just a theory and nothing is confirmed, so what do you guys think? Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories. Also make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you guys so much for watching.